Chapter 817. He's still my third cave master after all. I've already promised so many night roamers to him. Why, just leave him here and continue serving me. I believe there will be a day when the blood oath is removed and he can regain his freedom. Having resolved the most fundamental conflict, Li Qingshan's attitude eased up and he smiled. Everything else can be discussed today, but I have to take this bitch away. Yi Weiyang said. Li Qingshan glanced at Ghost Shadow curiously. He had no idea how he had offended the Shadow Queen so deeply. I'm afraid I can't comply with that. If I can't even protect a subordinate, what's the point of being the king of savages? Ghost Shadow cast a grateful gaze at Li Qingshan. From a certain perspective, his objective was the same as Yi Liusu's. They both underwent the third, heavenly tribulation before returning to the Shadow Palace. Yi Weiyang gradually raised an eyebrow. Her sinister killing intent began to permeate the surroundings. Li Qingshan turned to his side and looked back at her. His smile remained the same, but he showed no intentions of backing down. The atmosphere that had just eased up immediately tensed up again. It made the Banyan Tree King sigh inside. Ghost Shadow's existence was not particularly important to them, yet they just had to fall into a stalemate for the sake of their pride. I'm Shadow Queen. Can you listen to me on this? Yi Liusu interrupted before shooting a glance at Li Qingshan. If they stayed together any longer, they would definitely start arguing again. All right, I'll listen to what you have to say first before I take this bitch away, said Yi Weiyang. A crescent moon silently sank into the western mountains. The first rays of dawn surged in the east. Ghost Shadow followed closely behind Li Qingshan, nervously, but in the end, the Shadow Queen did not appear again. Only then did he let out a long sigh of relief and settle down. Yi Liusu sat under the great banyan tree. The seat before her was empty. Yi Weiyang had already left Savage Mountain silently. She was still in thought, remaining silent for a very long time. There was a flash before her, and Li Qingshan sat down in front of her. He smiled. How was it? Did you have a pleasant conversation? Yi Liusu nodded slightly and suddenly put on a charming smile. Thank you. Li Qingshan stood up and looked to the east. The road ahead is still long. In the myriad poison cult, several hundred fire basins of varying heights burned with gloomy green flames, dyeing the hall a wretched green. The myriad poison ancestor sat on his throne and felt rather uneasy, so he stood up and paced around the hall. He thought, have I miscalculated something? When the Shadow Empress makes a move, even I don't dare to be negligent, let alone a mere second heavenly tribulation brat. There's only death awaiting him. At this moment, the flames moved without any wind, rising and flickering. The myriad poison ancestor's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly looked back, only to see that an additional item had appeared on the throne. It was the treasure of the myriad poison cult that he had offered as a reward. His expression changed, and he actually gave up on the assassination. Why? Why? He waved his arms and shouted loudly. His wide sleeves fluttered in the wind as a faint green flame ignited. However, there was no answer. Only his voice constantly echoed through the hall. Never did he imagine that the Banyan Tree King would support a human for free, helping him control formations and mediate disputes. However, with the assistance of the Banyan Tree King, Li Qingshan was instead even more at ease in the Mist Province than in the Green Province. Before long, the news of this battle spread across the south very quickly, even reaching the entire Mist Province. The Myriad Poison Cult was a very renowned large sect in the Mist Province, yet they had actually been destroyed by the King of Savages, Li Qingshan, in a single battle. Even the myriad poison ancestor was helpless against him. Everyone found this unbelievable after hearing Qian Liangmu's report. The king of Southern, you also became surprised. He held the chess piece between his fingers and forgot to place it down. He said to the banyan tree king on the other side of the chessboard, "Sure enough, there's a reason why you've taken a liking to this kid, fellow. It does make my killing intent grow heavier. Let's just focus on harmony." The banyan tree king smiled. The king of Southern you raised an eyebrow, and the surprise in his eyes deepened. The banyan tree king's attitude was even clearer than last time. Last time, he said he was forming a good relationship with him, not exactly protecting him, but now his intention of protecting him was very strong. It was very worth considering. It had to be mentioned that when the banyan tree king agreed to control Savage Mountain's formations and went to great lengths to mediate between him and the Shadow Queen, he was no longer absolutely neutral. Even with his wisdom, it was impossible for him to not have any likes and dislikes, as well as distance between people. When others looked at Li Qingshan, they only treated him as a genius disciple of the Chan monastery of Devanaga, but in his eyes, he was a supreme prodigy that only appeared once every 1,000 or even 10,000 years among demons, and he had a fortuitous encounter with him. The king of Southern, you said in amusement. No wonder this Li Qingshan is bold enough to come to the south and become the next commander. As long as you give the order, who's bold enough to touch a hair on him? Life and death are decreed by fate. Riches and honor are determined by the heavens. The banyan tree king expressed his attitude. If the king of Southern you really did make up his mind to eliminate Li Qingshan, he would not forcefully stop him. This was what he had to bear when he referred to him as fellow. Aren't people of my generation supposed to defy the heavens and change fate? The king of Southern you asked. The banyan tree king only smiled. He did not answer. Li Qingshan, are you bold enough to come out and fight me? Above Savage Mountain, the myriad poison ancestor rode on a poisonous cloud. His voice boomed like thunder, making no effort to hide the raging fury in his heart. Myriad poison, you old coot, how dare you act so recklessly on Savage Mountain? Aren't you afraid I'll wipe out your myriad poison cult? Li Qingshan stood on the top of the mountain and laughed aloud. Whether you're bold or not, you only need to say the word. The myriad poison ancestor said. What if I say I'm not bold enough? Li Qingshan said leisurely. Then you can drop the title of King of Savages, because you're not worthy, the myriad poison ancestor said. Someone vaguely told me that too. Hee, whether I'm worthy or not isn't something an old coot like you can decide. If you want me to come out, then I just won't come out, Li Qingshan said. All right. If you're so capable, don't come out for the rest of your life. I'd like to see just how long you can hide for. The myriad poison ancestor pointed at Savage Mountain and said in exasperation. He had truly been angered this time. He was even willing to use such a stupid method to teach Li Qingshan a lesson. You can stay here for as long as you want. I can't be happier cultivating in my dwelling, Li Qingshan said. The myriad poison ancestor snorted coldly and sat on the cloud. He had made up his mind to go head-to-head with Li Qingshan. If he stays outside Savage Mountain the entire time, the cave masters we let out won't be able to report back. Little and said, just let them stay outside for a little longer. I'll piss off this old coot first. I obviously won't be hiding the entire time and competing with him in terms of patience. I just happen to want to use him for some practice. Li Qingshan rubbed his hands and said eagerly, although the lifespans of cultivators were much longer than mortals, their concept of time was not as distinct as mortals either. The higher their cultivation, the more this was the case. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. The myriad poison ancestor had no intentions of leaving. He seemed to be submerged in cultivation, but he had always been paying attention to Savage Mountain below. As soon as Li Qingshan left the formation, he definitely would not be able to escape his senses. Chapter 8:18. However, Li Qingshan was different. He had achieved success as a young man, earning the name of the Wild King in his 30s. Now that he had been sealed up, how could his mind not be affected? He would definitely become restless, which would affect his cultivation. And if he could not hold himself back anymore and dared to come out and fight him, that would be even better. He was confident he only needed a single move to claim his life. The myriad poison ancestor had a plan, so he was in no hurry. He sat on the cloud firmly, like a mountain that weighed down on the sky above Savage Mountain. On this day, clouds stretched for thousands of kilometers, pitch black like ink, weighing down heavily. Thunder rumbled as drizzle drifted with the wind. A storm was about to arrive. Li Qingshan stood on the top of the mountain and raised his head. He could not see the myriad poison ancestor, but he could clearly sense that he was still there. It's about time. During this month, he had spent the entire time cultivating in the Azura field, focusing on the demon suppression statuary. He allowed the viciousness of the tiger demon to surge before converting it into the power of the demon heart, gradually diluting the spiritual chi in the ocean pearl. His demonic chi became purer and purer, vaguely yearning for a battle. "I'll watch over you." Little and stood beside Li Qingshan. His clear eyes scanned through the clouds. Li Qingshan planned to temper the tiger demon's fighting spirit in this battle. The chances of him killing the myriad poison ancestor were extremely slim, so there was no need for Little and to take action and expose his trump cards. However, since Little and was watching over him, he obviously had to wait for that tiny chance to appear. With a clang, Li Qingshan immediately demonified. His body was covered in armor, and his appearance underwent many minute changes. He became a little more blood red, and he became even more vicious. With a boom, the rock beneath Li Qingshan's feet collapsed, scattering in all directions. He had already burst out of the clouds, appearing 5 kilometers away. The myriad poison ancestor suddenly opened his eyes, and green light flashed through them. He was pleasantly surprised, but it immediately turned vicious. "You really are still young, unable to keep your composure. Allow me to personally crush a genius like you." He stood up resolutely. His green robes ruffled in the fierce wind. His 2 skinny hands danced within his wide sleeves, and the rolling poison gas condensed into a ball of poison wrapped in lightning. Thunder pearl of myriad poisons. Li Qingshan was flying through the clouds, avoiding a purple snake-like thunderbolt. Far and near, the sound of thunder could be heard everywhere. Suddenly, danger loomed over them. A green light descended from the sky, penetrating through the dark clouds, growing brighter and brighter. Boom! A huge hole was blasted open in the thick layer of clouds. Layers upon layers of clouds spread out like the tide. However, the sun still couldn't be seen. The sky was filled with even thicker green clouds. Under the green clouds, the pitch-black demon-suppressing tower was in tatters on the verge of collapse. Li Qingshan summoned the Devil Suppression Pagoda at the critical moment and blocked the attack head-on. As expected of a third heavenly tribulation great cultivator, "You're quite powerful." The single eye on his forehead lit up, and a streak of light shot out. Through the green cloud, he saw the myriad poison ancestor sitting on the jade throne. The throne wriggled slightly like jelly. The monsters engraved on it seemed to come alive, opening their mouths together and spitting out thousands of lightning pearls of myriad poison endlessly. They all rained down. The corner of Li Qingshan's lips curled, and he flew up against the wind. With a rattle, 100 chains of demon suppression extended, ripping through the air and lashing out like whips. Boom, 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 boom. The lightning pearls of myriad poison all exploded, and the sky became a terrifying region of lightning. The shock waves swept across 50 kilometers. Li Qingshan suddenly rushed out of the lightning region. His armor was covered in scars from the lightning strikes, but it forcefully blocked them all. He dove into the green cloud again. Even with the protection of the demon Qi, his ears were immediately filled with the sizzling sound of the poison corroding away. Some of the edges and corners were directly ground away, as if they would be completely corroded away if he remained in the poisonous cloud for just a moment longer. Li Qingshan was fearless. The myriad poison ancestor was right in front of him. He swung his right hand backwards, and the demon dragon sword appeared in his hand. Kill! The sword was like a dragon, directly aimed at the myriad poison ancestor's forehead. However, the myriad poison ancestor smiled viciously. A green membrane rose up from the jade throne like a soap bubble, blocking the demon dragon sword. Li Qingshan silently clenched his left hand into a fist. This fatal strike, filled with awe-inspiring sword intent, was only a probe. As long as he threw the punch at the myriad poison ancestor's old face, he still had a chance. In that moment, Little En's figure vaguely appeared above the poisonous cloud. Her seaweed-like hair drifted, but her clear eyes had already become an almost transparent white flame. The Buddha-slaying sword was in her hand too, but suddenly a sense of danger rose up in her heart. Before she knew it, the myriad poison ancestor had held a green, poisonous tumor in his hand, nurturing it silently for quite some time. It was the protective treasure of the myriad poison cult. It shot out with a streak of pale green light. Li Qingshan blocked it with his sword, but he did not feel any resistance at all. However, the demon dragon sword produced a sorrowful cry. The green light dyed the edge of the sword and passed through the hilt, dyeing his right hand. Immediately, the armor on his right hand shattered, and his right arm went numb, spreading towards his body inch by inch. With a clang, the demon dragon sword shattered, dispersing into thousands of pieces. Li Qingshan could clearly sense that if it were not for the fact that he practiced the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine, which made his body as tough as a demon king's, he would have been smashed to pieces. Die! Seeing how Li Qingshan was actually unscathed, the myriad poison ancestor was taken aback. He leapt to his feet and swung his hand, throwing a palm strike towards Li Qingshan's chest. Li Qingshan was overjoyed. Wasn't this exactly the opportunity he had been waiting for? Cold light flashed through his eyes, and a wisp of fire-like hair emerged from behind the armor. He let out a deafening moo, and the figure of the ox demon appeared behind him, heading towards the myriad poison ancestor. He had thrown a punch. The myriad poison ancestor suddenly felt uneasy, but he was unable to figure out what had gone wrong. With Li Qingshan's cultivation, he had a 30% chance of surviving if he fled, but clashing head-on with him was clearly courting death. It was already too late for him to change his move now. The fist and palm collided. Time seemed to freeze in that moment. Li Qingshan's fist rapidly corroded, revealing the bones in the blink of an eye. Its flickering metallic luster dimmed from the corrosion as well. However, as the poison flowed, he smiled. However, the myriad poison ancestor was in disbelief. His skinny arm rapidly twisted and deformed, exploding into a mist of blood with a bang like a piece of wood that had been snapped. He was a great cultivator of the 3rd heavenly tribulation, but he was not particularly powerful against Li Qingshan, who could rival corpse kings. How could he withstand the great strength of a demon king, let alone the unstoppable power of tremors? Li Qingshan played him viciously from the front, causing him to fall heavily into the jade throne. Li Qingshan's scarlet eyes clearly reflected the myriad poison ancestor's shocked expression, as well as a ghostly figure. He stepped on the green bubble conjured by the jade throne, sinking in deeply. He raised his arms high into the air and crossed his fists, throwing them down with a roar. Even a mountain would be smashed to pieces. Boom! The green clouds dispersed, revealing the azure sky. The green bubble twisted and surged violently. Against Li Qingshan's powerful strike, it actually did not shatter and even showed signs of recovering. Its defense was as tough as it could get. It was basically undefeatable. The myriad poison ancestor raised his head and gazed at Li Qingshan. His armor had all been corroded away, revealing his sturdy body. He had a devilishly handsome face, and his unbridled, insolent smile revealed his sharp fangs. The pair of ox horns on his head were like crescent moons about to pierce the sky. Just who is this kid? The myriad poison ancestor considered retreating. A sword protruded from his chest, and the Buddha-slaying sword pierced the green bubble, passing through the back of the jade throne and his back. Behind the green jade throne, there was a white skeleton surrounded by rolling flames. With her here, he would never be alone. Why, you... The myriad poison ancestor widened his eyes, which were completely bloodshot. The Buddha's slaying sword definitely was not just tough and sharp. It was currently destroying his mind, igniting his flesh and blood, and devouring his soul. Li Qingshan did not waste any more words. He planted his feet on the left and right armrests of the jade throne and grabbed the myriad poison ancestor's head, throwing another punch. Little and swung the Buddha's slaying sword, and the samadhi flames of white bone surged out, enveloping the myriad poison ancestor. His white bone claws reached towards the back of the myriad poison ancestor's head. The green, poisonous tumor in the myriad poison ancestor's hand suddenly swelled, beating like a heart. With each beat, it would expand to 10 times its original size, revealing green veins and vessels. The myriad poison ancestor produced an inhuman roar. Die! Retreat! Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed. He forcefully pulled back his fist, and his phoenix wings flapped violently as he retreated in a hurry. Little and pulled back his sword and turned around, but he was already a step too late. The green, poisonous tumor turned into a green sun. Thousands of rays of miserable green light shot out, eclipsing the white sun above and swallowing them. The green light landed on a mountain peak in the distance. The mountain peak collapsed silently, landing in the dense forest below. Whether it was the trees or rocks, they were all reduced to dust, immediately forming a pit of white sand. The light dispersed. Most of Li Qingshan's flesh and blood had vanished, as if invisible insects had gnawed away at it, revealing his craggy bones. They no longer shone with a metallic luster, becoming extremely fragile. Little N's white bones had also been dyed with a rust-like color. He arrived beside Li Qingshan. "Are you all right?" "I won't die. That old bastard ran away," Li Qingshan said. As they spoke, Little N used the samadhi flames of white bone to suppress the spreading rust. Li Qingshan also used the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression to suppress the poison that had infected him. Even though they had grasped the opportunity, killing a third heavenly tribulation great cultivator was not that easy. The brief delay was enough for the myriad poison ancestor to flee back to the myriad poison cult. The formations of the myriad poison cult were on Savage Mountain, and the myriad poison ancestor personally presided over them. Although he was not as powerful as the Banyan Tree King, he could still unleash enough power. Even if the two of them were unscathed, they would struggle to break through. We've used all of our trump cards this time, but he still managed to escape. It'll probably be troublesome from now on. The hunting dogs have already been mobilized. They might be able to keep him busy for a while, said Little, and The hunting dogs? Oh. Li Qingshan suddenly understood. He smiled. You sure are thorough. The Azura commander Yin Qing flew off, constantly flickering in and out of existence. She followed the streak of green light closely, searching for an opportunity, and ready to strike at any time. When Li Qingshan fought little and had given her the mission, she had been observing the battle from the mountain peak the entire time. When the myriad poison ancestor detonated the cult treasure and fled Savage Mountain, she immediately set off. She only had a single mission: to keep the myriad poison ancestor busy. Chapter 819. Thousands of kilometers away, the myriad poison ancestor flew through the air. His face still twitched. Apart from his anger and humiliation, he was mostly filled with lingering fear. He had almost failed miserably on this trip to Savage Mountain. After blowing up the cancer, he wanted to use this opportunity to kill the two of them, but in the end, his cautious side still won him the upper hand. In other words, he could no longer ignore the sense of danger in his heart. He felt like ensuring his own safety was more important, so he flew towards the myriad poison cult without even looking back. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. Looking back, he saw a blood shadow tailing behind him, constantly flickering and growing closer and closer. He bellowed, "Don't you dare, you scoundrel!" That bellow demonstrated his tremendous bearing as a great cultivator, enough to split a river with his shout. He did not weaken at all. If regular cultivators heard it, they would definitely shudder in fear. Those with slightly weaker cultivations might even develop inner demons from fright, or even their souls might disperse. However, the corner of Yin Qing's lips curled up. A defeated general was nothing to brag about. She had still overestimated this old man by comparing him to an Azura king. She had gone through bloody battles of life and death in the Azura realm. So how could she be frightened by a disturbance like that? Instead, it only made him even more cowardly on the inside. With a wave of her hand, the circular blade spun out, directly piercing through space, and arriving before the myriad poison ancestor. The myriad poison ancestor sent the circular blade flying with a furious palm strike, but he could not help but falter. Yin Qing suddenly appeared above his head, and like a blade, she plunged her fingers towards the top of his head. Just now, Li Qingshan had grabbed the myriad poison ancestor's head and beaten it to death. He had already viewed it as the greatest humiliation of his life, so how could he let his head be touched again? With a flick of his sleeve, poisonous gas surged out and forced why the myriad poison ancestor, a withered hand, was hidden inside. However, ready to strike Li Qingshan, like venomous little snake, and practiced suddenly, a wondrous technique. It discovered an opening far surpassed and reached towards Yin Qing's which allowed them to forge extremely tough bodies. Yin Qing vanished. They were not afraid of being poisoned shifting several dozen meters away. The poison making the myriad poison ancestors fatal strike miss. So they could only suppress it for now. Her body had been eaten away by the poisonous gas. It would still take a very long time. There were some places where the flesh did not wait for his wounds to recover directly exposed. She had gone from an enchanting beauty to an extremely when many parts of his body were still jagged. She did not care at all. Suddenly, and instead unfurled his phoenix wings. This old man's poison around Little is indeed fierce, but it's not fatal to me. Surge this way, and flames I can drag it out, constantly accumulating power. Immortal body. Right when he was about to set off, he suddenly dared to say that he could kill her voice with a single punch. He saw the myriad poison waving at him from the top of the mountain. An ill omen. Have a safe journey. At the same time, to write back on Savage Mountain. Fuck you. Li Qingshan gulped down the sap in a joking manner from the banyan tree. He suddenly unleashed his power, leaving behind the moonlight reflections to draw out the spiritual energy from the water god seal through the cloud dream marsh pursuing the myriad poison demon chi. His flesh
Bitch,
grew
you're an
back
Ashura?
strand by strand.
Why did you listen
On
to
the other
Li
hand,
Qingshan,
little
and
brandished the myriad poison
banner
cult to
a
kill
blood
people.
dragon flew
Wasn't
out
it you?
and coiled
The
around
myriad
him,
poison ancestor
cleansing his
barked.
white skeleton.
He had clashed with
diluting the
Qing
poison
several
before
times,
using the Samadhi
so he could
flames
not
of
help
white
but
bone
sigh
to
in
cleanse
amazement
it
at the
regular
ingenuity of her
cultivators were
teleportation.
poisoned by the myriad
However,
poison ancestor.
it made him
They
remember
would be
something.
in huge
Just
trouble.
who was
If
responsible
they
for
could
the
not
massacre
find the
of the
antidote,
myriad
they
poison
might
cult.
have to contend with the
Originally,
poison for the
he
rest
thought
of their
it was
lives.
Ghost Shadow,
And they would probably
but let
be doomed
alone
in
whether
the
he
end.
possessed the
As a
ability
result,
to pass through
even
formations
great
or
cultivators
not.
with cultivations,
Even if he did, no
he would
lower
only
than his
be
had
able
to
to
be
kill regular
extremely
disciples
cautious
at most,
when they clashed
protectors,
with him,
unless
elders
they had
would
no
never
other
be killed,
choice.
so
They would
easily.
never want to become
He
enemies
suddenly
with
found
him.
the answer to the question that had been plaguing him the entire time. This woman, this Ashura, has that kind of strength. Do you like the view on the square? And those words on the screen wall? They're pretty, aren't they? I've written them very diligently. After all, it's been so many years since I last wrote one. Inqing smiled. Her figure flickered in and out of existence. Although she had been avoiding an open clash with the myriad poison ancestor the entire time, her situation was not optimistic either. Half of her right arm had been eaten away, and due to the effects of the poison, it was unable to recover. Her other injuries were even more numerous. In order to keep the myriad poison ancestor busy, she had paid quite the price. But even with that being the case, her sharpness did not diminish at all. This was the battle heart of an Ashura that she had forged through the years. It really is you. The myriad poison ancestor flew into a rage. Li Qingshan had wiped out the entire myriad poison cult, and it was all because something had happened in the cult. He had been drawn back to the myriad poison ancestor. Now that he saw the culprit behind all of this, how could he not grit his teeth in hatred? He regretted underestimating Li Qingshan once again. Originally, he thought he was just a junior, but never did he expect him to possess such strength where he could even order around an Ashura commander. If it's me, what are you going to do? Qing did not seem to care at all, but she appeared several hundred meters away in a flash, pulling away from the myriad poison ancestor, slightly. She thought, who knows what other killer moves this old man has yet to unleash. I better be careful and not give him an opportunity, or my life really will be in danger. The myriad poison ancestor said, sinisterly, you want to keep me busy so that Li Qingshan can hurry over, but little do you know that he's been poisoned by me. He's already struggling to protect himself right now, so how can he still care about you? I must kill you today. With that, he suddenly raised his hands high into the air. Myriad poison burial. However, he coughed up a mouthful of blood first. This was a secret technique of the myriad poison cult. Even when his body was unaffected, he would still have to endure some pressure, let alone when he was heavily injured right now. He would be harming himself before harming the enemy. However, for the sake of revenge, he could not care so much anymore. More importantly, He did not wish for an assassin like this to come and go as she pleased while he was recovering in the myriad poison cult, threatening him at any time. The poison on Inqing erupted with 10 times, 100 times more intensity. Her eyes became covered with green veins, shriveling up in the blink of an eye. Her ears, eyes, mouth, and nose that she had been carefully protecting the entire time immediately became useless. She could no longer see, hear, or smell anything. She was alarmed, but she did not panic. She immediately used a spatial movement technique and hid in space. However, the poison spread madly. If this continued, she definitely could not last for much longer. The myriad poison ancestor did not move at all. He maintained his posture of raising his hands high into the air, circulating his powers at full strength. Blood constantly oozed out of his mouth, but the corner of his lips curled into a cruel, vengeful smile. He did not need to take too long. He only needed to last for a while, and she would die from the poison. Then he would return to the myriad poison cult to recover and take revenge on Li Qingshan. This time, even if he had to cast aside his pride and beg the honored guests he was on good terms with, he would still kill Li Qingshan no matter what. But in reality, there was a thought that even he was reluctant to admit. Compared to revenge, it was better described as self-protection. The battle had scared him. If he allowed Li Qingshan and Little and to continue cultivating, regardless of which one of them underwent the third heavenly tribulation, it would be his death. Blood sprayed from the myriad poison ancestors' what Li Qingshan
was
capable of.
Suddenly,
He could kill the
back at the
myriad
horizon
poison
ancestor
and saw
in
a streak of fire
before he
fly
could
over.
even die from
Li
the poison.
Qingshan saw
At
the
this
myriad
moment,
poison
Li Qingshan
ancestor
and
from
Little
afar,
and were
before
basically
he could even
innocent
celebrate.
bystanders,
He felt the
but
poison he had
unknowingly
suppressed
they had helped
after
Li
so much shoulder a
suddenly
lot of the
erupt
pressure,
violently,
the myriad
corroding
poison
his body.
ancestor, and even
On the
his
other
soul
hand,
wildly
felt the
he
pressure
could not help
multiply.
but be surprised.
The more poison
This
he
old
detonated,
bastard
the
still
more
has something
pressure
like that
he had to
Though,
endure.
It seems
His
like he can't
wounds
move
worsened
when he uses this
even
move.
further.
If I
Although
make him
he was
sit on the
tempted to
jade
throw his
throne
life at
and
Li
use it
Qingshan
calmly
or focus
it'll
his
really
attention
be troublesome
and kill the
unbeknownst
Azura
to Li
with poison
Qingshan.
first.
That
He
was
saw
what
how
the
Li
myriad
Qingshan
poison
paused before
ancestor
charging
originally
over again.
planned to do.
Although
But
he was much
unfortunately,
slower now,
he did
it
not
would
even
not
have
take
the
long
opportunity
either.
to use it
He
before his
immediately
defenses
paled
were
and
breached.
shocked,
And he was
no
forced
longer
into
bold
dire
enough to
straits.
persist any longer.
After being heavily
Dispelling
injured,
the technique,
he became
in a hurry
even more
and
afraid
flying
of
away.
using it carelessly.
Inqing used the last bit of her strength to leap out of the space there. She could not hold on any longer and fell down. Li Qingshan caught her and said, "Thank you for your trouble." He sent her back into the Azura field before handing the Azura field to Little, and he told her, take her back to Savage Mountain to cure her of the poison. Little Anne hesitated before nodding. She had also been affected by the myriad poison ancestors' myriad poison burial. The poison had flared up again, so she did not have as great a recovery rate as Li Qingshan. If she persisted in the pursuit, it would probably cause even greater damage to her body of white bones that she had refined after so much difficulty. Li Qingshan flew off as his scarlet eyes locked onto the speck of green light. He only had a single thought in his head, which was to prevent the myriad poison ancestor from fleeing back to the myriad poison cult safely. In the sky, a streak of green light was in front, and a streak of scarlet light was in close pursuit. They moved with lightning speed, covering 1,000 kilometers in the blink of an eye. Both of them were fighting with their lives on the line. The myriad poison ancestor's wounds worsened, so he was nowhere close to his peak condition. Li Qingshan was quite injured too, and he was poisoned, but he possessed a fierce fighting spirit that only grew stronger as the battle progressed. He circulated his demon core and flapped his wings, rapidly closing the distance between them. A while later, the tip of the scarlet light had basically touched the tail of the green light. They were less than 5 kilometers apart. Chapter 8:20. The myriad poison ancestor ravished with joy. He glanced back, but his pursuer was nowhere to be seen. It was Qingshan. He was clearly a demon,
with scarlet eyes, fire-like hair, ox horns, and a tiger's tail. His murderousness and malice combined into demon chi, surging into the air and pressing over. Without the demonic armor's concealment, everything seemed extremely clear. The myriad poison ancestor wondered the Chan Monastery of Devanaga is an orthodox school of Buddhism, so why would they accept a demon as a disciple? And that little and definitely isn't human either, which is why he can resist my poison. He could vaguely make out the 2 words, North Moon, engraved on the ox horns. Suddenly, he recalled an incident from several years ago. Back then, it had spread like wildfire among the upper echelon of the Mist Province's cultivation community. The Dragon King of the Sea of the Green Province had suddenly entered the territory of the Mist Province. Originally, they thought he had some sort of dispute with the Banyan Tree King, but only afterwards did they find out he was hunting down a demon. The demon's name seemed to be North Moon. The myriad poison cult rapidly drew closer and larger, about to arrive in a moment. The myriad poison ancestor no longer had any qualms. He swung his sleeves backwards, and with a great boom, a ring of green light exploded. Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed, reflecting the green light. At such a distance, and with such speed, it was impossible for him to dodge in time. He bellowed out and smashed through the green light with a punch, but he could not help but slow down. However, the myriad poison ancestor used the recoil to move even faster, immediately pulling away from Li Qingshan. He did not forget to leave behind a vicious threat filled with resentment. Li Qingshan, I will never forget today's grievance. I will definitely repay you generously. You better survive today first. Li Qingshan extended his hand towards the myriad poison ancestor from afar and pressed down. The ox demon's gravity. The myriad poison ancestor immediately felt his body become 100 times heavier. Suddenly, he plummeted down, colliding against a mountain on the ground. He adjusted his body in a hurry and shot past the top of the mountain, creating a gully. If he's bold enough to chase me to the vicinity of the myriad poison's hand, I can activate the formation ancestor immediately became I didn't think he'd as a feather. Actually give up. Not only did the gravity's body tensed up, becoming as firm as a mountain and as steady as the earth. He suddenly drifted. He gave up on the pursuit, rushing towards the horizon. An innate ability that did not possess any offensive power at all. It was extremely difficult to control his body. As long as he was on the ground, he was seriously injured. The second innate ability suddenly undulated as provide him with endless slowing down a lot and make his strength even greater. While he was in a horrible shape, a large part of the ox demons great towards the myriad poison cult at the end of the day. Ability. The gravity of the earth was unable to cause him any actual harm. And Li Qingshan had to split his attention that it had never been used before. So his speed was adhere to the ox demon's lineage, which was discreet, the myriad poison ancestor would escape. As a matter of fact, Li Qingshan would sometimes that I have to let him escape this calamity, this innate what should I do? Provide him. It's a pity that although this gravity field is and not useless, it can only distract the enemy. It would be great if it could lure him to me. The sun and moon shone brightly, eyes suddenly and the stars were far away as he understood something. They were like the father of all he had life. Complained that the ox demon trample was rain, useless and dew were all his benevolence. But now the earth below was vast, innate divine ability, and the mountains stretched no matter who the enemy was. She was like the mother of all life, nourishing all life with great ability of the ox demon. All life revered the imperial heaven as an assistant, and cultivators pursued the enemy heavenly way painstakingly, and stopped flapping about the earth beneath their feet. Seeing this, they called it the myriad poison ancestor. As a result, Li Qingshan spread his arms. This kid sure is decisive. I am the child of the earth. He's flexible with his actions. The myriad poison cult was right in front of him. The myriad poison ancestor only needed a few seconds to arrive, while he had already pulled an extremely great distance away from Li Qingshan. No matter what he was capable of, it would all be useless. He could finally rest and heal in peace before thinking about a plan for revenge. His instincts told him that he could make use of his identity as the North Moon. Perhaps he could destroy Li Qingshan's reputation and crush him to smithereens without even shedding a single drop of blood. As he thought, he suddenly halted, but after a few ups and downs, he was already prepared. He would not be affected so easily anymore. But this time, he discovered that the invisible power did not make him fall down. Instead, it pulled him backwards. Li Qingshan used the gravity of the earth again, but he used the strength of the earth to change the direction of gravity and pull the myriad poison ancestor towards him. He did not move at all. Even his murderousness had thinned out, replaced by a vast and heavy aura. He unleashed the strength of the ox demon. The power was invisible and intangible, but it could not be cut off or severed, gripping the myriad poison ancestor firmly. In shock, he discovered that not only did his speed become slower and slower, but he actually came to a halt in the end against his will, gradually drawing closer to Li Qingshan. The myriad poison ancestor's expression changed in shock. He let out a hoarse roar, desperately wrestling with the power. If he were in peak condition, he could probably put up a fight, but he was heavily injured right now. In order to pull away from Li Qingshan, he was even willing to worsen his wounds. He was already at the end of his tether. Li Qingshan was rather injured too, but the strength of the earth was something he could unleash at full strength no matter what state he was in, even if he was heavily injured or on the brink of death. If he wrestled with someone using the earth as his foundation, he was confident that he would never lose, no matter what form it was. The myriad poison ancestor watched helplessly as the myriad poison cult grew further and further away, while Li Qingshan drew closer and closer. Finally, he began to panic. Li Qingshan, you really are going to fight me to the death. I'm an honored guest of the King of Southern Yu's estate. If you kill me, the King of Southern Yu will never spare you. Li Qingshan's expression was determined. He said nothing, possessing a tenacity that would never stop until he achieved his objective. No matter how the myriad poison ancestor threatened, scared, tempted, or begged for mercy, he remained unfazed. I'm going to kill you today. 5 kilometers, 5 kilometers, a kilometer, 300 meters, 30 meters, 3 meters, die. Li Qingshan let out an extremely delighted roar and threw a punch at the myriad poison ancestor's old face. Chapter 8:21. The power of tremors spread through the myriad poison ancestor's entire body. Cracks covered him like a spider's web, and he collapsed silently. Suddenly, a streak of green light shot towards Li Qingshan's forehead. It moved several times faster than the myriad poison ancestor when he was in peak condition, and under the pull of the gravity of the earth right now, it was even faster than before. Even Li Qingshan could not respond in time. He caught a glimpse of it and saw that the green light was a fist-sized infant. It was half-transparent and resembled the myriad poison ancestor slightly. Its face was filled with resentment, a soul nascence. After undergoing the third heavenly tribulation, human cultivators would convert their golden core into a soul nascence, condensing their cultivation within their soul. Even if their body was destroyed, it would not be life-threatening. All they had to do was find a new body, and they could possess it and be reborn. Existences at the third heavenly tribulation were very difficult to kill. Demon kings were because of their tough bodies and startling life force. As for human cultivators, they relied on the mysteries of soul nascence. If they chose to flee, they would be extremely difficult to capture, and at certain times they even possessed the power to reverse life and death. The myriad poison ancestor had launched a counterattack at a critical moment. This was the first time Li Qingshan had seen a soul nascence either, let alone being unprepared. Even if he had been prepared, he would not have been able to respond in time. With a flash of green light, the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence vanished. Li Qingshan froze, maintaining his posture of swinging his fist. Even the delight on his face had not been completely erased. Li Qingshan, oh Li Qingshan, if I didn't have any way of fighting back, wouldn't I have blown up my soul nascence immediately and taken you down with me? I didn't want to use this move originally, but you've gone too far. Now, I'll make you understand the difference between us. Green light illuminated Li Qingshan's sea of consciousness. The myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence descended with the might of a sovereign. It was both delighted from turning the tables, but it was also filled with resentment and reluctance. Although a destroyed body could be reborn through possession, the price they had to pay would be extremely great too. As a result, no great cultivator would choose this path unless they had no other choice. The myriad poison ancestor had also been forced into dire straits, putting up a desperate struggle. He was confident that he had the situation under control. No matter how many magical abilities Li Qingshan had, it would be difficult for him to use them in his knowledge sea. No matter how strong his body was, there was still a qualitative difference between a mere spirit and his nascent soul. Although this was Li Qingshan's home ground, in this confrontation of the sea of consciousness, he undoubtedly had the absolute advantage. What was left to do was to completely crush Li Qingshan's thoughts and then completely occupy this body. Although I've condensed a nascent soul, I've been stuck at the early stage, unable to make a breakthrough. Originally, I had no hope of breaking through to the fourth heavenly tribulation. This body is as strong as a demon king's. It will definitely increase my strength greatly. Even if there are some conflicts and discomfort, it won't be too much of a loss. Li Qingshan, all your hard work has gone to me. But before that, he wanted to listen to Li Qingshan's cries for mercy and enjoy the pleasure of revenge. If you beg me and listen to my instructions, this old man can consider sparing your life. The myriad poison ancestor sent out a thought, but the green light from the nascent soul became even more dazzling, contaminating Li Qingshan's knowledge sea like poison. Demon suppression. Li Qingshan bellowed out inside, and it exploded in his knowledge sea like thunder. The demon suppression statuary's primary purpose was to suppress the demonic nature within oneself, and only then did it suppress the demonic path in the outside world. In that moment, the inside and the outside had become one. The strength of Li Qingshan's demonic nature went without saying. The myriad poison ancestor was a powerful figure of the demonic path too. The demon suppression tower appeared in the sea of consciousness, as large as a mountain. It crushed down viciously towards the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul. With a boom, the green light vanished. The myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul was suppressed beneath the tower. Chains of demon suppression as thick as dragons crisscrossed, locking the demon suppression tower firmly. If you beg me, I might even spare your life. Li Qingshan's voice rang out in his knowledge sea. Even he had never expected the demon suppression statuary to be so powerful. It truly was a special cultivation method of the Chan monastery of Devanaga, after all. Child's play. In the demon suppression tower, the myriad poison ancestor bellowed out. Immediately, the pitch-black demon suppression tower was dyed green, shining with green light. Oh no! Li Qingshan visualized the demon suppression statues and used the demon suppression statuary as hard as he could, pouring all the remaining demonic energy in his demon heart into the demon suppression tower to contend against the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul. However, the demon suppression tower shook violently, and the green light grew brighter and brighter. Li Qingshan realized he had still underestimated the power of a nascent soul. He watched helplessly as the chains of demon suppression snapped one by one. With a great rumble, the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul burst out of the tower, shining with blinding light. His knowledge sea surged violently, as if a green sun had risen up from the ocean. With a kacha sound, a tiny crack appeared on the demon heart, and it became dim and lightless. Li Qingshan knew he could not even use the demon suppression statuary in a short amount of time, let alone summoning the demon suppression tower. Humph, you're just putting up a desperate struggle. You overestimate yourself. I'd like to see what else you've got. The myriad poison ancestor said. He felt like he had everything under control. He was prepared to viciously torture Li Qingshan's soul, releasing all of the resentment from the sneak attack and pursuit. Before he had even finished speaking, Li Qingshan said calmly, "The spirit turtle suppresses the seas." The spirit turtle manifested and descended from above. Compared to the demon suppression tower, the spirit turtle did not possess much might. Not only was it much smaller than the demon suppression tower, but it descended very slowly too. It shone with a faint glow as it descended slowly at a steady pace. However, wherever the light shone, the churning sea of consciousness calmed down. The green light seemed to freeze too, losing its original might. What? The myriad poison ancestor paled in fright. There were not a lot of cultivators who specially practiced techniques for battles in the sea of consciousness. Normally, at a time like this, it would be a clash of the strength of their souls and consciousnesses, let alone demons. The strength of the demon suppression tower that Li Qingshan had summoned had already left the myriad poison ancestor extremely surprised. He never thought he would have an even stronger move. You want to fight me? Let's see who's the one putting up a desperate struggle and overestimating themselves. Li Qingshan sniggered. As someone who practiced the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine, he did not have any shortcomings. He was flawless both inside and out. Whether it was a clash of techniques, melee combat, or a clash of consciousnesses, he had a set of methods to deal with them all. When the myriad poison ancestor smashed through the demon suppression tower, he seemed unstoppable, but he had actually exhausted quite a lot of his strength. His soul nascence was no longer as bright as it was in the beginning, shrouded in a layer of dullness. Although he resisted as hard as he could, the spirit turtle suppresses the seas was far more powerful than the demon suppression statuary. The spirit turtle pressed down on the green light inch by inch. It seemed slow, but it was unquestionable, all the way until it reached the top of the soul Nassence's head. As it turned out, only 3 inches of green light remained, but it was extremely condensed as well. They entered a stalemate for a moment. However, Li Qingshan had the water god's seal to replenish him, while the myriad poison ancestor was alone and helpless. Before long, only 2 inches of green light remained. The outcome had already been determined. Chapter 8:22. The figure of the spirit turtle hovered above the myriad poison ancestor's head, no longer pressing down. However, it continued to shine. Li Qingshan definitely did not believe the myriad poison ancestor did not have the determination to fight to the death. Most importantly, the spirit turtle's suppression could not be completed in a single moment. It was enough for him to consider. If the soul nascence exploded in a sea of consciousness, he would definitely be smashed to pieces. No matter how tough his body was, no matter how startling his regenerative powers were, he would not be able to escape death. Li Qingshan could not help but sigh. This myriad poison ancestor sure was difficult to deal with. He had succeeded in launching a sneak attack while he was off guard. And then he made the Azura assassin Yin Qing keep him busy while he hunted him down. In this battle, Little N had basically lost his battle prowess. Yin Qing was heavily injured and on the brink of death, yet he had almost managed to escape. He had finally broken through after so much difficulty and thought he could finally kill him, but he still ended up in a stalemate in the end. Hurry up and stow this turtle away, or I'll take you down with me. The myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence clenched its fist, filled with viciousness and determination. Li Qingshan did not stow the spirit turtle away. Instead, he smiled. Myriad poison, you've cultivated arduously for 1,000 years, and you've only undergone the 3rd heavenly tribulation after so much difficulty and condensed a soul nascence. Yet you keep mentioning taking me down with you at the drop of a hat. Who do you think you're trying to scare? Even though he was not bold enough to force the myriad poison ancestor into dire straits, he was underestimating Li Qingshan's courage if he thought he could do whatever he wanted just because he said he would take him down with him. He believed that as long as the myriad poison ancestor had a sliver of hope, he would not choose such a terrible plan. If it was an ordinary cultivator who had fallen to this state, they might have thrown caution to the wind in despair, teleporting them to his clone in the marsh. Although they had the same emotions as mortals and the myriad poison ancestors, they would not lose their rationality. He prepared for the worst-case scenario as he racked his brain to come up with a plan. You're in the prime of your life, escaped far enough away. Already capable then even if of something like poison ancestor blew up his soul nascence, even the princes of the Dragon Province can't match and be reborn. My life this hasn't could be regarded in vain as his final trump with card. No future. However, like me, once the demon core left, like you, his strength would weaken drastically, and he would immediately lose control over the myriad poison. But he instead recovered some of his bearings and giving him the opportunity to escape. You're flattering me. As a result, just a young kid. He needed to use the water mirror's image to teleport the demon core one after another. The moment one said that the other had a profound cultivation, and that it was not easy to cultivate. Too difficult to grasp. The other praised the other for his talent and boundless future. The myriad poison ancestor would stop blowing himself up. But they would think that they were late. The demon core would be sucked into the explosion. Whoever cherished, how could he still have the opportunity would be under the control of others? Even if he used the spirit turtle's divination abilities to grasp the timing, as long as you find a suitable body, many years to recover. Affect your cultivation. When he turned into a phoenix's embryo, time, he could not even maintain the myriad poison ancestor some hope. It could be described as this old man has failed miserably, however, fallen into a worst possible plan was still a plan. How can I dare to think about the future than having no plan at all? I might as well give up. Li Qingshan made up his mind. Ancestor sighed. At most, and his soul nascence suddenly began to tremble. Send me back to terrifying power cult that could destroy every business from here was about to be unleashed. The myriad poison ancestor stated his conditions. Li Qingshan asked calmly. You sure can dream on. He arrived high up in the atmosphere. If I go back to the myriad poison cult and flapped his wings of wind, the formation, flying in the direction of savagery the moment you emerge.
Li Qingshan stalled for time as he sped up. As long as he returned to Savage Mountain, he could get little Anne's clever brain to come up with a solution, not to mention the fact that he had the Banyan Tree King, whose wisdom was as deep as the ocean. I won't make things difficult for you. There's no need for me to go to the Myriad Poison Cult. I just need to be at the edge of the Myriad Poison Cult. Remove this turtle and let me sense the outside world. And I'll leave, said the Myriad Poison Ancestor. Li Qingshan fell silent. Only when the Myriad Poison Ancestor pressed him did he say, "Since you already know my identity, you'll definitely make it public when you get back. If the Dragon King of the Sea comes knocking, I won't be able to deal with him." The Myriad Poison Ancestor happened to be planning this. Originally, he planned on feigning ignorance about the matter between the North Moon and the Dragon King of the Sea, but now that he had been exposed, there was nothing he could do. He answered with a question. "What do you want? Do you really want me to die with you?" As he said that, he assumed a posture like he was about to blow up his soul nascence again. "If that's what you want, then do as you please. Even the Dragon King of the Sea couldn't kill me in the past, so you won't be any different." Li Qingshan said coldly. All right, all right, all right. Then I'll try and see if I can drag you down with me," said the Myriad Poison Ancestor. All of his accumulated resentment seemed to erupt, making him rather hysterical. The green light in the core of the soul nascence grew brighter and brighter. Li Qingshan tensed up and immediately stopped flying. A piece of the spirit turtle's profound shell flew out before him. It was as bright as a mirror, but it reflected the situation in Cloud Dream Marsh almost 50,000 kilometers away. He spat out the demon core, which stopped on the edge of the mirror. But a while later, when he saw how Li Qingshan did not respond at all, the soul nascence on the verge of erupting settled down again. The Myriad Poison Ancestor said viciously, "Kid, you sure are something. Just let me stay in your sea of consciousness the entire time. I'd like to see how you cultivate." The older people got, the more they cherished their lives. They lacked the bravery and vigor of young people. They had gone through so much to reach their current level of cultivation. Unless they had no other choice, they would never choose the path of mutual destruction, no matter what. And the fact that Li Qingshan had managed to escape from the Dragon King of the Sea did indeed make him fearful. If he threw his life on the line, Li Qingshan would be alive and kicking again in a decade or so. That would be a great loss. This kid had far too many tricks up his sleeves. Though, since he wants to negotiate with me, he's still afraid of me blowing up my soul nascence at the end of the day. Even if he can escape alive, he'll either not have too much confidence, or he'll have to pay an extremely heavy price, or both. Humph, I refuse to believe you can trap me in your sea of consciousness for the rest of my life. Let's see who can outlast the other. You better calm down. Let's come up with a plan that satisfies both sides." Li Qingshan could not help but laugh aloud, but he was sweating inside, as even when his soul nascence was about to explode, he still had not grasped the opportunity accurately.
All he could do was gamble. Chapter 8, 23. The myriad poison ancestors' poison sure is potent. Is there anything I can do about it, Senior Tree King? Ru Xien crossed her arms and asked, pointing at her chin. They were in a tree hole beneath the great banyan tree. It was composed of huge, intertwined roots. It was extremely spacious, filled with the fragrance of resin. Yinqing laid on a platform composed of roots. Her body had been reduced to a humanoid shape by the poison, and her aura was extremely feeble. A droplet of yellow-green venom dripped from her body, kicking up a puff of white smoke when it landed on the ground. As an Azura, her body and life force far surpassed regular cultivators or even demon commanders, but she did not possess a heaven-defying cultivation method like the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine, or the path of white bone and great beauty after all. She still could not endure the myriad poison ancestors' poison. All I can do is maintain her life force, but the poison is still deeply rooted, spreading and strengthening by devouring her life force. Even the cleverest housewife can't cook a meal without rice. The unique secret technique of the myriad poison cult requires a corresponding antidote. It all depends on whether he can bring back the myriad poison ancestors' Sumeru ring. The banyan tree king's voice echoed through the tree hole. A dark green aerial root fell down, injecting sap into Yinqing's blood. This guy is very petty. He'll stare back even if he's glared at him. Myriad poison has offended him, so what good fate awaits him? Ru Xien smiled. Li Qingshan chatted with the myriad poison ancestor as he flew through the sea of trees. Compared to the nervousness and intensity he felt earlier, he was much more relaxed now. However, the myriad poison ancestor's existence was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. He had to get it out. When the sky darkened, Savage Mountain came into view. The huge hole blasted open in the clouds had already closed up and vanished. It was currently drizzling. Little and stood on the top of the tall tower on the main peak. Her black hair was like mist about to merge with the rain. Only when she saw Li Qingshan's figure did her lips curl into a smile and fly over to receive him. Li Qingshan told Little and everything that had happened, but Little and was unable to come up with a good idea immediately. I better ask the Banyan Tree King for help. How's Yinqing? Li Qingshan asked as he passed through the fog. Ru Xien's injuries are under control, and she's currently thinking of a way to detoxify the poison. Little and said, Ru Xien, I almost forgot that she's also a disciple of the School of Medicine. Let's go and take a look. Li Qingshan was very friendly to those who served and helped him. After passing through the 8-directional foggy sea formation, the valley was filled with rain and fog. The towering trees were soaked by the rain, and their color was especially deep. Even the mountains were dyed black. Seeing this familiar scenery, Li Qingshan couldn't help but relax, and a relieved smile appeared on his face. Although there was still a great threat that hadn't been eliminated, he had still won this battle. His ears twitched as if he had heard something. I heard you bad-mouthing me from 10 miles away. Li Qingshan lifted the green vine curtain and walked in, glaring at him. I'll tell you. Ru Xien shrugged. How is it The Banyan Tree King asked. A great cultivator's fate was extremely important. If the myriad poison ancestor had died, he would definitely sense it. Since he did not sense it, it meant the myriad poison ancestor had already fled, which made sense too. Third, heavenly tribulation great cultivators were not that easy to kill after all. However, he had to consider this. If the myriad poison ancestor fled back to the myriad poison cult, then Li Qingshan's dual identities would definitely be exposed to the world. The reactions of the Hawkwolf Guard and the Chan Monastery of Devanaga would all be a small matter. If the Dragon King of the Sea pursued him everywhere, then that would be a huge problem. As a result, the Banyan Tree King had to consider how to mediate between them. I've dealt with it, Li Qingshan said calmly. You've dealt with it. A hint of surprise appeared in the Banyan Tree King's voice. Though, there's still a small problem. That old bastard's soul nascence ran into my sea of consciousness and refused to leave, so I've temporarily suppressed it. I still need to ask for your guidance. Let's cure Yinqing first. With a wave of his hand, Li Qingshan unleashed the water mirror's image again and retrieved the 2 Sumeru rings. However, it took quite a bit of effort to open them. In the end, he still had to ask the Banyan Tree King for assistance, and only then did he manage to open them. After a great battle, Li Qingshan was extremely exhausted, and he even had to split his attention to suppress the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence. Through this small matter, he became even more aware of just how unpleasant it was for the myriad poison ancestor to remain in his sea of consciousness. Normally, it would be fine, but if he encountered another great battle and the old bastard messed around in his sea of consciousness, he would use up 50% of his strength at the very least. If he accidentally allowed the old bastard to grasp an opening, he might even face the danger of turning the tables. Cultivation went even more, without a doubt. This bastard was truly an inner demon. It's no wonder that old bastard can keep stalling away calmly. His existence has blocked off my future prospects. There were many bottles and jars in the myriad poison ancestor's Sumeru ring. If he asked Li Qingshan to look for the antidote, he really would have no idea where to start. It was all thanks to the Banyan Tree King's great knowledge that he found a glass bottle. An aerial root sucked up some of the medicine and sprayed it on Yinqing. The poison immediately diluted by a lot. Li Qingshan and Little and also ingested the antidote according to what the Banyan Tree King had taught them, completely eliminating the threat of the poison. The Banyan Tree King sprinkled some more tree sap, and Yinqing's wounds healed rapidly. Before long, she slowly woke up, and her eyes that had been blinded by the poison regained their brightness. She murmured, "I'm still alive. This isn't the Azura realm." She had thought she would be reborn in the Azura realm. Through this battle, she had proven once again just how dangerous it was to provoke in existence an entire major realm of cultivation above her. "I haven't even allowed you to die yet." Li Qingshan laughed aloud. The Banyan Tree King said, "It's all thanks to the Azura realm that my life is no longer in danger. However, it's unavoidable that my strength will be affected, so I need to be mentally prepared." Yin Qing nodded slightly, expressing that she understood. This was not the Azura realm, after all. Even if she was injured, she could recover slowly. You've done a great service this time, so I'll reward you handsomely. I'm willing to repay you with my body. What do you think? Li Qingshan patted Yin Qing's shoulder with a smile. A cool, moist breeze blew into the tree hole, and Yi Liusu lifted the curtain and entered. She glanced at Li Qingshan and pursed her lips. Ru Xian chuckled, but she said nothing. Shaoan was emotionless and incorporeal. Cough, cough. I was just telling a joke to liven up the atmosphere. What's with your expressions? You don't have the slightest sense of humor. Even with how thick-skinned Li Qingshan was, he felt slightly embarrassed. Of course, it was only a tiny bit. He had gone as far as to rope in his subordinates for the sake of his great ambitions. Yin Qing burst out laughing. This King Shur had a lot of romantic debts. She recovered soon afterwards. My king's valiance in battle has left me in great admiration, but the reward is far too great. I'm just a willow, so I'm not blessed enough. I really can't handle it. I think it's better if he rewards me instead. Li Qingshan acted like he did not hear Ru Xian's mocking laughter. He instructed her gently, return to the Azura field and recuperate for now. I'll find a way to help you recover your strength. After sending Yin Qing to the Azura field, he passed the myriad poison ancestors' Sumeru ring to Ru Xian. Take a look and see if there's anything you need. Ru Xian did not hold back, searching through it carefully. The myriad poison ancestors' Sumeru ring was extremely well stocked. It contained the cultivation methods and resources of the entire myriad poison cult, which would be extremely helpful to her plan. Chapter 8:25. The endless yellow sand stretched into the distance without end. There was no sign of human habitation. Broken walls and ancient cities of the past had worn away the totem murals, leaving only a monotonous yellow that spoke of the vicissitudes of 1,000 years. A few withered poplars twisted and stretched their withered bodies. Their withered branches pointed at the transparent blue sky, like hands struggling to break free from the sea of sand, only to be buried by the yellow sand in the end. Li Qingshan stood at the top of a sand dune and saw everything. This is the Mirage Sea. It should just be an illusion, Little and said. The sound of the wind carried their voices into the distance. Li Qingshan crouched down and grabbed a handful of sand. The grains of sand flowed between his fingers. Not a single grain could be seen as fake. There was even a voice telling him from the bottom of his heart that all of this was real. Under the guidance of the Banyan Tree King's sea map, they found the legendary Mirage Sea without much effort. Although he knew that the Mirage Sea was not simple after Little N's warning and might even contain great danger, he still chose to enter the Mirage Sea due to his trust in the Banyan Tree King and the Spirit Turtle's divination. There was no danger to his life here, so he still chose to enter the Mirage Sea. As expected of the Clam King of Mirage Sea, this illusion is flawless. However, while it's strange for a sea of sand to appear in the sea, it's not imaginative at all. Li Qingshan smiled and revealed his pure white fangs. But if we can't break the illusion, how can we find the Clam King of Mirage Sea? Little N said, "Watch me." Li Qingshan said loudly, "Clam King of Mirage Sea, this one is Li Qingshan. I have come to the Mirage Sea to pay a visit under the guidance of the Banyan Tree King. Please show yourself. This is a visitation card." The sound waves spread into the distance like a tiger's roar and created ripples on the sea of sand. However, there was no response. There was only the sound of the wind. Li Qingshan could not help but be surprised.
He reached into his sumaru ring, but the visitation card that the Banyan Tree King had written for him was nowhere to be found. How was this possible? The sumaru ring was equivalent to an independent space. Was the Clam King of Mirage Sea really this powerful? Qingshan! Little and pulled Li Qingshan's sleeves and pointed to the distant sky. At the end of the sea of sand, there was a tall building that connected the sky and the earth. It looked a little vague in the heat waves. Let's go and take a look. Li Qingshan could not understand how he had lost the visiting card, so he decided not to think too much about it. Since the Clam King of Mirage Sea had already responded, everything would naturally become clear once they met and talked. She didn't use her phoenix wings and flew side by side with Little N. They flew very low, and the airwaves they set off plowed a long gully in the sea of sand, forming waves of sand. Under the illumination of the sun, they flashed with a golden light, extremely magnificent. Li Qingshan made a great vow to travel thousands of mountains and rivers and enjoy all the beautiful scenery in the world. Even though he knew that this sea of sand was an illusion, it was enough for him to enjoy. He looked at Little and beside him. Her skin was like jade, and her clothes were whiter than snow. Her black hair fluttered in the wind like a long ribbon. Her black and white were distinct, and there was only a slight smile on her red lips. She was so beautiful that she seemed like the spirit of the world, or even some kind of spirit that had gathered together. Perhaps it was the effect of this wondrous illusion, but Li Qingshan felt like this was the first time he had seen her like this. He also felt like he had been attached to her for 1,000 years. There was only a sea of sand, and he was alone. He felt a slight pain in his heart. His eyes were a little moist. He shook his head hard and looked at the mirage in the sky. He still remembered, I have to go there to find the Sea Serpent King. With an inexplicable reluctance, he continued to move forward. He always wanted to look back, but he hated looking back the most. He gritted his teeth and strode forward. Soon, the sand dune was left behind, and it was no different from the thousands of other sand dunes. The wind blew gently. Li Qingshan's face was gloomy. He kept moving forward toward the mirage. The scenery on the road became more and more monotonous. There were no ancient ruins or ancient poplars. There were only sand dunes, like waves on the sea of sand. The sandstorm became denser and denser. He could only give up on flying and walk on the sea of sand. After walking for who knew how many days or how many years, the sun always hung high above his head. It shone down scorching light, making him feel anxious. Even with the divine earth power, he felt tired. A layer of dust fell on his body, but he couldn't stop. The mirage was still there, getting closer and closer. Finally, after another sandstorm, Li Qingshan looked around. There was only an endless sea of sand. He stared at the sky. There should be something there. Chapter 8:28. The white sphere was buried in the black soil. It seemed like a human skull, but it was also a human skull was much smaller. He dug his hands into the soil with trembling hands and dug it out. His body immediately stiffened. His boiling blood seemed to plummet. It was just a white rock. Little Air, what's wrong? Don't scare me. Big brother, Li said miserably. He grabbed the witch's hand again. Has my younger brother been possessed? Save him. Little Air, is there something in my vegetable field? The witch told Big Brother Li to calm down first before rubbing his head and asking kindly. It was extremely familiar, yet also unfamiliar. I don't know. He grasped the white stone tightly, stood up dejectedly, his body swaying a little. Exhaustion, hunger, pain, in a split second, surged up like a tide, but it was not as deep and heavy as the disappointment in his heart,
but he did not know what he was disappointed about. Hadn't he been like this for the past decade or so? What was he yearning for? He made his way out of the witch's house and covered his eyes with his hand. Sunlight shone resplendently between his fingers. The sun rose as usual, radiating with warm light. The mist that enveloped the small village gradually dispersed, and smoke rose up from the chimneys of the houses. This was an extremely ordinary morning that he had repeated thousands of times in his life. From today onwards, he would spend every day and night like this, but he experienced a nightmarish fear. He returned home in low spirits and sat down at the table. He ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He gripped the rock that resembled a child's skull the entire time. The sun set again, but tomorrow would rise again. Crouching Ox Village was far too small, and life was far too ordinary. Everything spread like the wind. Very soon, everyone found out that Lee Erling had gone mad. They all came to visit him, but they all sighed when they saw him, saying that he was just too deeply attached to the old ox. He was unable to endure the blow, which was why he had gone crazy. The moon hung high in the sky. He finally stood up from the table and made his way out, arriving beside an ancient well in the village. He sat down on the moss-covered rock and gazed into the well. The water in the well quietly reflected the bright moon and the thin face of a young man, which was filled with confusion. Just what is wrong with me? Is it just because of a dream like that? However, even though the dream had dissipated like smoke, the feeling in the dream still lingered. It was an intense passion, a struggle, a wild laugh, an indulgence, a true love, and a death feud. His expression was twisted, and his scarred hands gripped the white stone tightly. Erling, you don't move. We can talk about it. A dead cow can't come back to life. Brother Lee's voice was trembling. He was afraid that Erlang was going to jump into the well, so he tried to persuade him. Little brat, you've really gone mad. Your parents died early. I raised you up with all my effort, and this is how you treat me. Sister-in-law Lee roared. As she spoke, she began to sob. You're not going to live like this anymore. Mrs. Lee roared. The sound of dogs barking could be heard throughout the village. Every household lit up their lights, and the villagers woke up from their sleep. In just a short while, they were all gathered around the well. Adults and children, men and women, were all trying to persuade him not to take things too hard. His gaze swept past the crowd, past the crouching ox hill, past the endless mountains. The two words, Qing Shan, suddenly leapt into his head. Like a flash of inspiration, he lowered his head and murmured, Qing Shan. Brother, where's the money from selling the cow? After a long time, he suddenly raised his hand and asked, You wait here, I'll go get it right now. Brother Lee rushed out of the crowd and quickly brought over the pouch filled with money and gave it to him. He looked at a few pieces of silver in the pouch, which shone silver under the moonlight. He put the stone in his hand into the pouch and suddenly stood up. The crowd quieted down, and pairs of eyes just stared at him. He looked around, chose a direction, and walked out of the village. The crowd was stunned by his expression and didn't dare to stop him. They split into two sides and watched his figure disappear under the moonlight. Brother Lee and sister-in-law Lee wanted to go forward to stop him, but they suddenly stopped, and a strange expression appeared on their faces. At first, his footsteps were very heavy, and he didn't know where he was going. But gradually, his footsteps became lighter and lighter. Using the bright moonlight, he followed the path that was about to be submerged by weeds and strode forward. After walking for a whole night, he walked into the town. The sky was already bright. He stood in front of a butcher's shop. A huge cow's head with a broken horn was hanging on the meat rack. The cow's eyes were wide open and had already lost their usual luster. It was a blur. Flies flew around. as if to add a few more boring footnotes to this mediocre animal's death. But he could clearly feel that the blurry eyes were staring at him with that familiar warm gaze. Suddenly, he felt his face moisten. It turned out that, unknowingly, his face was already covered in tears. "Little brother, what kind of meat do you want to buy? I just killed a big cow yesterday, and there's still a lot of good meat left." The butcher's boss asked a little strangely. He pointed at the cow's head. After a while, the butcher's boss watched him leave with a strange gaze. He faced the morning light, and the sunlight gilded his tall figure with a layer of light. On his back was a huge cow's head. The cow's head was very heavy, and together with the white stone in the pouch, it weighed heavily on his body. And that dream didn't seem to be faintly discernible anymore. It became heavy and clear. Time flew by, and the stars changed. The young man became a man, and the man became an old man. He traveled through countless mountains and rivers, but the scene in his dream never appeared. However, he still refused to stop. He continued to search and search. Finally, one day, he arrived at the top of the mountain and stopped. His once tall body was already hunched over, and his clothes were tattered. Only the skull of the cow's head remained on his back. The white stone had become as smooth as bone after being rubbed, but it was even heavier than before. He turned around and gazed at the path he had come from. Just how many times had he had the chance to stop and enjoy peace and joy, instead of being like this, suffering all the hardships and having nothing left? He could not help but think that perhaps he should never have come out. Perhaps he had already gone mad several decades ago. Chapter 829. Qingshan, Qingshan. An incomparably familiar voice called out anxiously, accompanied by a brisk clap. Li Qingshan slowly opened his eyes, waking up from his dream. He saw an ethereal and beautiful face. "Where am I? Who am I?" Then he immediately remembered. "I am Li Qingshan, and this is Clam Mirage." All kinds of memories flooded in. Li Qingshan's pupils contracted, and the confusion on his face turned into fury. He flipped and stood up, his right hand clenched into a fist and pushed against the ground. His left hand formed a claw and faced the dreamlike beauty dressed in colorful clothes across from him. All kinds of techniques were ready to be unleashed. Wonderful, truly wonderful. But the woman did not seem to notice. Her hands continued to clap, and she did not disguise the admiration in her heart. "Clam King of Mirage, see." Li Qingshan gritted his teeth and said, "Bastard, wonderful my ass. Come, let's have a showdown." He could not help but think back to a long, long time ago. The South Sea is truly spectacular. In the evening, Li Qingshan and Little N hurried from Savage Mountain to the shore of the South Sea. This place just happened to be a peninsula that jutted out of the land. Wind blew from behind them, and the sea was boundless with endless waves. The sun set in the west and dyed the sky red. The orange light spread from the horizon of the sea to the front along with the waves. The scenery was extremely beautiful. Little N frowned slightly and seemed to be in thought. She was not as calm as usual. "What is it? What are you thinking about?" Li Qingshan immediately noticed and rubbed her head, asking with a smile. "Nothing." Little N shook her head lightly. "What, is there something you can't tell me? You've really grown up. Let's go. The Mirage Sea isn't far." Li Qingshan listened to the Banyan Tree King's instructions and did not dare to stay for too long. He took out the sea map and glanced at it. After confirming the direction, he continued on his way. "Qingshan, the Clam King of Mirage Sea might not be as simple as the Banyan Tree King said." Little N suddenly said, "Is that so? Let's walk and talk." Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. Along the way, Little N told Li Qingshan all the legends he knew about the Mirage Sea, including the most mainstream views of the South Sea cultivation community. At this moment, a thin layer of mist suddenly appeared on the horizon. Normally, Li Qingshan wouldn't have cared at all, but when he looked over, he found that the mist was changing as if it had a life of its own, vaguely revealing a strange and dazzling scene. That was the place marked on the map, the location of the Fantasy Sea. It looks like this clam king of Mirage Sea didn't purposefully set up a trap to bait people. Otherwise, no one would have noticed it at all, Li Qingshan thought. Little and looked at Li Qingshan, waiting for him to make a decision. I told you that the clam king of Mirage Sea isn't that simple, but you don't have to worry too much. Fellow Taoist Tree King must have his reasons for not letting you tell me this. It's not to harm me, or else he wouldn't have gone through so much trouble. There must be a reason behind it, Li Qingshan said after some thought. I'm sorry. Little and lowered her head. With her intelligence, how could she not understand this? Logically speaking, listening to the Banyan Tree King's orders would be the most beneficial, but she was unable to deceive him, so she could only apologize. The only thing you did wrong was to say that. Li Qingshan lowered his head and said seriously. Little N's innocent expression was especially lovable. Do you know your mistake now? Li Qingshan smiled. Yes. Little N nodded with a smile. Don't do it again in the future. I'll use the spirit turtle to divine again. Right now, no matter what Li Qingshan did, he was used to using the spirit turtle to divine his fate first. He had already done it once when he came here, but the future seemed to be shrouded in mist, preventing him from obtaining an accurate result. Clearly, it was the influence of the Fantasy Sea, but fortunately, there were no signs of death. No matter how mysterious the Fantasy Sea was, if it was a fatal death trap, it was impossible for there to be no warning with the miraculous abilities of the spirit turtle. That was why he dared to come here, without any worries. However, when he performed the divination again, the result made him slightly stunned. Although the future was still blurry, it clearly showed danger, and there was even a hint of killing intent. He could not help but feel bewildered. Just knowing a few more things has caused such an obvious change in my fate. Normally speaking, shouldn't the more I know, the more I can avoid danger? If I was tricked by a lie, it would be understandable. However, the series of legendary information regarding the Fantasy Sea is clearly closer to the truth than the beautiful future described by the Banyan Tree King. How is it? Little N asked hurriedly. Nothing changed. Li Qingshan smiled. Don't lie to me. I didn't even lie to you. Little N pouted. All right, it seems to have become a lot more dangerous. Li Qingshan said, sigh as expected. Little N could not help but sigh. This proved that she was indeed wrong. Compared to the bliss of ignorance, I would rather bear the danger of knowing. If you lie to me too, I will feel worse than death. Li Qingshan looked into Little N's eyes with a smile and said very seriously. This was why Little N hesitated again and finally made this choice, even though she knew it was wrong. Mutual trust was more important than life. Do you still want to go? Of course. When have I ever been afraid of danger? It's not like I'm going to die for sure. Didn't I make it through a situation where I barely survived? Besides, curmudgeon myriad poisons is a little more troublesome. Li Qingshan smiled and flew to the end of the sea, diving into the Fantasy Sea, with Little N. In an instant, the scenery around them changed greatly. Tall buildings rose from the ground. The concrete buildings were clearly the modern city that existed in Li Qingshan's memory. Under the hazy sky, they stood in the center of the crossroads. Complicated signal lights constantly flashed, and people and vehicles moved back and forth. No wonder the scenery everyone sees in the Fantasy Sea is different. So this illusion can reflect the inner world, Li Qingshan sighed. This is where you've lived. Little and said in surprise. She could tell that this unfamiliar city had its own set of operating rules. Only two people knew about Li Qingshan possessing innate wisdom. One was Brother Ox, and the other was Little, and he had mentioned it to her when he was copying novels in the past. Of course, in this wondrous world of the 9 provinces, this was not some great, earth-shaking secret. Chapter 8:31. Second floor, 5th floor, 10th floor. As Li Qingshan climbed up, he encountered all kinds of strange enemies. They were all from his imagination, and they were getting stronger and stronger. After reaching the 13th floor, he could no longer win easily, but he did not care. He unleashed his divine abilities and power, and the more he fought, the braver he became. He enjoyed it. Little and supported him from the side, with a hint of deep worry in her eyes. I hope it's not like what I think. With a loud boom, the metal monster was blasted into pieces, and the door to the upper floor opened. Little, and what floor is this? Li Qingshan panted, and the wounds on his body slowly healed. The enemies were getting stronger, and he was starting to feel tired. 99th floor. But if we calculate the height, the top floor should be above us. Little and said calmly. Is that so? I was just getting excited. Is this game called Go Up 100 Floors if you're a man? Let's go. Li Qingshan laughed and flew up to the 100th floor of the Mirage. Long, colorful curtains hung down in the tranquil palace. Wind surged in from all directions through the open doors, and the curtains swayed in the wind. The various colors wove together, brushing past Li Qingshan's face. Then he caught a whiff of an obscure fragrance. The incense burner spat out curling smoke, but even the wind was unable to disperse it. It coiled around the palace like mist. Li Qingshan reminded Little and to be careful, and walked cautiously to the center of the palace. Little and looked at his back and frowned slightly. The mirage went deep into the dark clouds. There was no height to calculate, and this was an illusion. Li Qingshan soon saw a figure dressed in colorful clothes. Her back was facing them, and she was drinking by herself. May I ask if you are the Clam King of Mirage Sea? Li Qingshan bowed and asked probingly. I am. Please take a seat, esteemed guests. I've waited for a long time. The clam monarch of Mirage Sea waved her sleeve and spoke without even looking back, and she didn't seem to be displeased by Li Qingshan calling her fellow Taoist. Li Qingshan carefully circled around the Clam King of Mirage Sea. A dreamy and beautiful face appeared in front of him. He thought, it really is a woman. However, because he was in an illusion, he did not dare to confirm whether what he was seeing was real or fake, so he sat down in front of the Clam King of Mirage Sea. Little and stood next to him and observed the legendary Clam King of Mirage Sea. Before Li Qingshan could speak, the Clam King of Mirage Sea said, You said you need my help. Is it for myriad poison? She glanced at Little and half intentionally. That's right. Only fellow Taoist can do this. Li Qingshan cupped his hands. Sure. The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled and stood up. She made her way over to Li Qingshan and extended her hand towards his head. Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows. His entire body tensed up, and he clenched his fists tightly. He was like a ferocious tiger that was ready to strike. Little and suddenly pressed down on his shoulder. Li Qingshan was slightly surprised, but out of trust in her and the fact that the spirit turtle did not warn him, he sat still. The Clam King of Mirage Sea's hand reached into Li Qingshan's forehead extremely gently, as if she had reached into a pool of water. It created a colorful ripple, and then she pulled out a jade-like, dark green nascent soul. The nascent soul that looked like an infant had its eyes tightly shut and was in a deep sleep. It did not resist at all.
Li Qingshan touched his unscathed forehead and could not help but be surprised. This was basically unbelievable. Something that even the banyan tree king found troublesome had been resolved so easily by her. Everyone has their own specialties. The clam king of Mirage seemed to read Li Qingshan's thoughts and said with a smile. Chapter 832. The clam king of Mirage poked the myriad poison ancestors' soul nascence with the tip of her finger. This enemy that Li Qingshan found troublesome was currently sleeping, as delicate as a real infant. In this world of the Mirage Sea, the Clam King was the absolute ruler. Whether it was the poisonous alcohol or the bewildering smoke, they were just mediums. What truly took effect was still the Clam King of Mirage Sea's unbelievable power. No matter how cautious Li Qingshan was, she could pull him into a dream with just a blink of an eye. "I'm willing to dream this dream for him," Little An said to the Clam King of Mirage Sea, as she cradled Li Qingshan's head. "No matter how close you are, there are some things that cannot be replaced. Originally, I wanted to give you a dream too, but unfortunately, your heart is empty. Nothing can be reflected, let alone a nightmare." "A nightmare?" Little An said. "Oh my, I think I've let the cat out of the bag." The Clam King of Mirage stuck out her tongue and covered her mouth as she giggled. Just now, her composed, elegant, and noble image had suddenly collapsed. She was like a child who had succeeded in a prank, but her face remained a blur the entire time, as if it constantly flowed and changed among the faces. Little An understood that this image of hers, even the way she spoke and did things, originated from Li Qingshan's imagination to a large extent. Only now that Li Qingshan had fallen asleep did she gradually reveal her true face. Regular people could not see this true face, as when people interacted with others, it was inevitable for them to have some preconceived notions and some illusions. The Clam King of Mirage Sea's existence itself would be distorted and affected, just like how everyone saw a different Mirage Sea. The Clam King of Mirage Sea had 1,000 faces too. Only Little An practiced the path of white bone and great beauty, being colorless and without self, without sense, and without form. The Clam King of Mirage Sea's image was unable to receive the support of impressions and imagination, which was why she presented this true face that had no fixed face. They sighed in their hearts, "What a strange existence. All right, the dream has been formed. Come, let us take a look. Let's have a drink." The Clam King of Mirage smiled and pointed at Li Qingshan's head from afar. Li Qingshan's head shone brightly, and the roof above him suddenly turned into a colorless and transparent gas. Under the illumination of the light, it shone with a myriad of colors and gradually condensed into a picture hanging in the sky. Boundless yellow sand spread out. Poplar trees, ancient cities, ruins, and broken walls formed a desolate scene. Li Qingshan stood on a sand dune. "This is the fantasy sea." Beside him, Little An replied, "It should be an illusion. This nightmare seems to be very special." Clam King of Mirage watched the scene with great interest. "This is—" Little An looked up. This nightmare did not seem dangerous at all. The Clam King of Mirage countered with a question. "Do you know what is the most primitive, deepest, most enduring, and most powerful emotion in a person's heart?" "Love." Naturally, this was not Little An's answer. Instead, it was a young girl who jumped out of the Clam King of Mirage Sea's body. She cupped her hands and had an expression of yearning, blazing but not lasting. The Clam King of Mirage shook her head. The young girl paled. "Friendship." A forthright man with an unkempt beard jumped out of the Clam King of Mirage Sea's body. The White Emperor still holds his sword when he knows. The Clam King of Mirage waved her hand in disdain. The man was silent. "Kinship." A white-haired,
old granny said with a benevolent expression. Loving mothers are common, but filial sons are hard to find. The clam king of Mirage seaside. The old granny silently shed tears. She felt that it was slightly strange for her to say this. After all, he had seen the most bizarre and dazzling dream illusions. Even the modern city Li Qingshan had imagined only slightly surprised him. Look, the real show is coming. Now that he's lost you, he can only move forward alone in the desert. His fear is growing deeper and deeper. The clam king of Mirage lay down comfortably and enjoyed the dream as she munched on sunflower seeds. Suddenly, she asked Little, "And do you want some?" Little ignored her and looked up at Li Qingshan passing through the sandstorms. The confusion on his face grew heavier and heavier. He felt a slight pain in his heart formed from magic power. This kid's fear is really unusual. Normal people would only see some terrifying monsters or enemies that have come back from the dead. It's worth mentioning that I've appeared many times. However, this kid's desire on the surface is to fight monsters and climb buildings. He's basically a battle maniac. In other words, he's not afraid of fighting me? How daring! But it's still the same. Fear is the most primitive and deepest emotion in a person's heart. There is no exception, so accept your fate. Why don't we make a bet on how he'll die? The clam king of Mirage took out another bucket of popcorn, as if she was watching a novel movie, with great interest. Little drew his sword and said, "Wake him up immediately, and let us go, or I'll kill you." "Kill me?" The clam king of Mirage pointed at her own nose, and her ever-changing face suddenly froze. It was the overlapping of thousands of faces, all filled with disbelief. "You know who I am? I'm the Mirage." "See, hi, king. Wahahaha. Cough, 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 cough." The clam king of Mirage voice shook up the space. She let out a wild laugh before coughing violently. She choked on the popcorn. "I don't have the slightest hostility towards you," said Little, and the clam king of Mirage leaned on her hand and was troubled. "That really is a problem." "Yep, then I'll let you chop to your heart's content." Shaoan slashed down with her sword. The clam king of Mirage brought her palms together and caught the edge of the sword. "Your sword is a little strange. I feel like I can't let you hit me." In the Mirage world, with the clam king of Mirage strength, even if the myriad poison ancestor struck out at full strength when he was in peak condition, he would not be able to harm a single hair on the clam king of Mirage She would already be lucky enough to escape from the Mirage However, the Buddha's slaying sword was not a regular arcane treasure. It possessed a unique power, which even made the clam king of Mirage feel a hint of danger. Little tried to pull the Buddha's slaying sword, but it did not budge. The pale white samadhi flames of white bone lit up in his eyes, and the skull prayer beads slipped into his hand. "Give up. If you had undergone the third heavenly tribulation, I would also be fearful, but right now you're nowhere close to being my opponent. If this continues, your empty heart will develop true hostility or even killing intent for him. By then, you'll be in danger too. I don't want to kill you." The clam king of Mirage said sternly, like a warning, but also like a persuasion. The color in her eyes changed, unleashing the bearing of a supreme demon king. She was even more powerful than Li Qingshan imagined her to be. However, Little ignored her. "Release him. Look, he's going to die. He's going to die. Look back. Don't miss the most fascinating part." The clam king of Mirage pointed at the reflection in the sky and called out like she was having a seizure. Little suddenly turned around. Li Qingshan had collapsed in the white desert and was gradually buried by the white sand. At the same time, his aura became extremely weak. He was not injured at all, but he was on the verge of death.
Chapter 833. Qingshan. Little and saw Li Qingshan furrow his brows in his sleep, as if he was in great pain. The Clam King of Mirage sat down again. She was no longer careless. Instead, she sat upright and still, gazing at the dreamy reflection in the sky. Li Qingshan paced back and forth in his dream. The scenery in his dream was nothing more than an ordinary village the entire time, but he showed a nightmarish fear. She asked Little, "And where is this?" "Crouching Ox Village, the place where he was born." Little and glanced at the Clam King of Mirage Sea. "In other words, this is 20 years ago. It really is as I thought. So this is his greatest fear, his greatest fear. It's not pain and death, not forgetting everything and dying alone, but fear that this is all a dream." The Clam King of Mirage Sea's voice trembled slightly. Little and sensed her abnormality and said in thought, "Since you said that all living beings have fear in their hearts, then it's the same. What is your greatest and deepest fear, Clam King of Mirage Sea?" The Clam King of Mirage Sea sighed and did not answer him directly. "Right now, I really do want to wake him up, but this goes against the principles of my existence. So he's dead for sure. In the past several millennia, the cultivators who accidentally entered the Mirage Sea and then sank into their nightmares might not even be able to face their greatest fear before they were killed by the monsters in their nightmares. However, through his extraordinary courage that did not fear death, he managed to last until now, entering an even deeper nightmare. However, he was forced to face his greatest fear. This was already an unsolvable knot. No one could defeat their greatest fear. No one. The greater the courage, the deeper the fear. This was the most primitive, deepest, most enduring, and most powerful emotion. It had always been the cornerstone of willpower. "I don't believe it," Little and said stubbornly. "All right, then let's wait and see." The Clam King of Mirage Sea was no longer satisfied with watching from the sidelines. Instead, she threw herself directly into Li Qingshan's dream. As she gazed at the dejected Li Qingshan, she could not help but sigh inside. She even felt a hint of anticipation. In the reflection of the dream, Li Qingshan dug out a white stone from the witch's backyard and sat there for a whole night. Then, he walked out of the room and came to the well. "Is it finally over?" Through the villager's eyes, the Clam King of Mirage Sea gazed at the dejected Li Qingshan by the moonlight well. She could not help but sigh. If it was an ordinary dream, committing suicide was indeed a way to escape. However, dying in this deepest nightmare was only a dead end. Even the soul would be destroyed and then be digested by the mirage. The legends of the South Sea's cultivation path were not completely false. However, Li Qingshan stood up and walked out of the village. The Clam King of Mirage Sea was stunned, and so were all the villagers. Brother Li and sister-in-law, Li wanted to go up and stop him, but the Clam King of Mirage Sea stopped them. She did not want to cause any more trouble. She wanted to see just what this man wanted to do. Moreover, when this man decided to leave, how could a village man and woman stop him? When Li Qingshan stood in front of the butcher's shop in town and stared at the ox head in a daze, the Clam King of Mirage Sea looked through the butcher's eyes and saw this. "You still refuse to give up and want to confirm it? This oxen really does mean a lot to you. It's basically a pillar of support that you can't live without, but you can see now. Miracles don't exist. Dreams don't exist either. You should give up now. Go back to your crouching ox village." However, Li Qingshan shouldered the ox head and made his way off into the distance. The Clam King of Mirage Sea gazed at his receding figure and revealed a strange expression. Chapter 834. A while later, Little and explained the entire story to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan could not help but find it unbelievable. In his opinion,
every single demon king was an extremely powerful and independent individual. They all had their own distinct personalities and opinions. It was far too strange for the Clam King of Mirage Sea to display different attitudes and stances based on the other party's will. He could not help but re-evaluate the Clam King of Mirage Sea before him. Just what kind of existence was she? His initial guess that she was trapped by love was basically a joke. Then why did she spend her entire life wandering the South Sea? It's all my little, and was about to apologize when Li Qingshan interrupted him. What? Nothing. Little, and lowered his head. That's more like it. It feels like many years have passed, but don't think I don't remember what I said. Li Qingshan smiled. However, this also explained why the Banyan Tree King did not tell him the truth. Once he learnt the Clam King of Mirage Sea was a monster like this, it would be impossible for him not to raise his guard. It would be very difficult for him to deal with the myriad poison ancestors' soul nascence smoothly. However, there were still many twists and turns in the end, and it was still not over yet, as even a blind person could sense his deep hostility, let alone the Clam King of Mirage Sea, who could read minds, who knew what kind of changes would occur, but he had never been afraid of a challenge. He said to the Clam King of Mirage Sea, "In other words, I asked for all of this myself. It's not your fault at all." Hee, you can't blame the mirror if you're ugly, right? The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled like a flower. Then now that everything has happened, can you let us go? Li Qingshan composed himself and controlled his battle intent. No, the Clam King of Mirage Sea said firmly. Really? Li Qingshan squinted his eyes. As it seemed, there was no way they could be amicable this time, but how was he supposed to defeat the Clam King of Mirage Sea? Don't worry. I don't plan on bullying you anymore. The Clam King of Mirage Sea waved her hand with a smile. Bullying? Li Qingshan frowned. He had clearly been forced into dire straits, enduring unprecedented suffering, yet it was actually just bullying? It was really unpleasant. Although it's called bullying, it's actually very beneficial to you. Although you have a kind of courage to advance bravely, in the end, you are still too young. Without tempering your mind, your cultivation speed will become slower and slower, and it's very easy for you to fall into a bottleneck. This dream allows you to face the fear in your heart. It can be considered as making up for your shortcomings. This is rarer than any miraculous elixir, although it was a little dangerous. You should be thanking me for the result. The Clam King of Mirage Sea tilted her head and stared into Li Qingshan's eyes with a smile. This is really hard to be moved. Perhaps I should thank your 8 generations of ancestors. Li Qingshan looked inside his body. Although he was extremely tired, he was unprecedentedly clear, like a rusted sword that had been sharpened and became sharp. In his heart, he had to admit that the benefits that this dream brought him were truly indescribable. First of all, he gained a deeper comprehension of the Ox Demon transformation. Although he had forcefully pushed the Ox Demon transformation to the 5th layer, it was like a child playing around with a huge blade. He had never been able to use it freely, only able to purely use its great destructive power. Only in the battle against the myriad poison ancestor did he comprehend the use of the gravity of the earth. Now, with his brand new vitality, he only needed to consolidate it, and he would be able to unleash even greater power than the 5th layer of the Ox Demon. He could not help but sigh. So the 5th layer of the Ox Demon can be so powerful. I'll probably have to break through to the 3rd heavenly tribulation before I can unleash my full strength. By then, are there any demon kings in the world who can contend against me? The other benefit was that the spirit turtle had become even clearer and clearer, like the dust on a mirror had been brushed away. Its senses towards the obscure changes in the heavenly secrets and fate had become sharper, and when it was applied to abilities, it naturally had even more subtle uses. The warning signs had already vanished. There did not seem to be any danger in the Mirage Sea anymore, but Li Qingshan still dared not be careless. The Clam King of Mirage Sea really could not be predicted using common sense. Doesn't that go against the principles of your existence? Little and asked, "Don't look at me like this. I have my own opinions too. I just don't use them very often." The Clam King of Mirage Sea stretched out her body and gazed at the sky. She said, "I might still be a stranger to you, but I've already known you for many years in my dreams, Li Qingshan. In other words, should I call you an old friend?" Li Qingshan sneered. He did not feel honored that someone was admiring his sorry state in his nightmares. "Hee, that won't be necessary. However, I hope you know that I share the same fear as you, which is why I've been trapped in this Mirage Sea for several millennia." The Clam King of Mirage Sea extended her hands as if she was trying to demonstrate the length of several millennia. "Didn't you create this place with clam chi?" Li Qingshan asked in surprise. "Aren't cocoons created by insects?" The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled and scolded, "It's all that bastard's fault. I was just joking around with him, and he tricked me like this." The more she scolded, the angrier she became. She felt that just scolding was not enough to vent her anger. Suddenly, she jumped up, and a man in dragon robes suddenly appeared in her hands. She slapped him left and right. "Is it so great to be an emperor? Is it so great to be an emperor? Huh." Li Qingshan looked at Little and communicated, "Is there something wrong with this Clam King of Mirage Sea's head?" There was nothing more terrifying than a powerful, crazy woman. No one could guess what she would do down there. After a while, the Clam King of Mirage Sea tossed the man aside and lay on the ground. She exhaled. "Forget it. It's still my own problem." When she saw that she had calmed down, she suddenly went crazy again. She grabbed her hair and rolled around on the ground. Why? Layers of illusions appeared in all directions. They were vaguely thousands of pained faces wailing and moaning. They contained a terrifying power of destruction that made people's hearts palpitate. Clam King of Mirage Sea, Your Excellency, we want to go back." Li Qingshan took a step back. He was no longer angry at the Clam King of Mirage Sea. There was no point in fighting a crazy person. Also, this crazy person really did look a little scary. It was better to keep some distance. No, the Clam King of Mirage Sea suddenly turned around, and the thousands of faces roared together. The incomparably enormous pressure made Li Qingshan feel like he was looking at the Dragon King of the Sea again. He asked in return, "What else do you want?" The Clam King of Mirage Sea smiled. The sky returned to blue, and the sun shone brightly. It was as beautiful as a dream. "As a reward for your spectacular performance, I've decided to give you a gift." I don't really want it, but all right." Li Qingshan had to admit that he was still rather curious. A streak of green light was tossed towards Li Qingshan. It was the myriad poison ancestors' slumbering soul nascence. Li Qingshan caught it carefully, and all he heard was the Clam King of Mirage Sea say, "I've already completely suppressed his will. He won't put up any resistance, even if you use him to forge an artifact." Li Qingshan thought of something, and suddenly thought of a bold idea. If he used the third ability of the Tiger Demon, abetting the tiger against the myriad poison ancestors' soul nascence, he wondered if he could turn him into a haunt. In the past, he would never have dared to consider something like that. The will of a great cultivator was far too powerful. If he was careless, he might even suffer a backlash. However, it was a heaven-sent opportunity right now. In the past, he had also turned a group of demon commanders into haunt, but the souls that had lost their bodies and demon cores were far too weak. They were not of much practical use at all, so he could not be bothered with them afterwards, handing them all to Little and to Refine. However, soul nascence was different. It was the condensation of a great cultivator's cultivation. Even if their bodies were destroyed, it would not affect their strength too much. If he could turn it into a haunt, that would be equivalent to obtaining a great cultivator's servant, and it would be absolutely loyal and would never betray him. It would be much more useful than a blood oath scroll, or something like that. Then, thank you for your gift, fellow. We're about to bid farewell. Li Qingshan did say that with some sincerity. Although he had gone through unprecedented danger during this trip, it was all worth it if he could obtain something like this. Stop right there. Who said this was my gift? Do you even have a brain? You clearly brought this yourself, so why would I be so petty as to give it to you as a gift? Are you looking down on me? Li Qingshan. The Clam King of Mirage Sea grabbed Li Qingshan's shoulder and bellowed fiercely. Say it, say it. I'm in the wrong, all right? Li Qingshan wiped the spit off his face. For the first time in his life, he was completely unmoved by a great beauty. Although he had been scolded for no reason, he began to look forward to it. Just what kind of gift could make the mighty Clam King of Mirage Sea so serious? An arcane treasure? That was too tacky. He just felt like it should be something more precious. The Clam King of Mirage Sea suddenly stood on her tiptoes and wrapped her arms around Li Qingshan's neck. She whispered into his ear, "This world is a dream. Warm, fragrant, and fragrant." In that instant, Li Qingshan had to admit that he was slightly moved, but before he could feel it in detail, the Clam King of Mirage Sea had already left. She stared straight at him as if asking, "How is it?" Huh. Li Qingshan was stunned. He pointed at his ear and said in disbelief, "The gift you're talking about is what you said just now? This gift is too heavy, isn't it? But I believe that you can endure it." The Clam King of Mirage Sea sighed again. She could not bear to look at him any more, afraid that he would be crushed by this gift. "You're such a big idiot to believe a crazy person like me." Li Qingshan raised his head and took a deep breath so that he would not explode. He lowered his head and clasped his hands together. "I'll accept this gift. Can we go now?" The Clam King of Mirage Sea suddenly reached out and grabbed Li Qingshan's heart. With his experience from last time, Li Qingshan did not dodge at all. The tip of her finger touched his chest and produced a rainbow-colored ripple. Afterwards, she reached in and pulled out an item. Of course, what she took out was not his heart, but Li Qingshan's divine talisman of great creation that had been sealed for a long time. "You're a disciple of the School of Novels, right?" The Clam King of Mirage Sea played with the divine talisman of great creation that flowed with colorful light. "What else do you have to say? If you want this thing, I'll give it to you, all right? I'm begging you, do a good deed, and let us go." Li Qingshan could not stand this crazy person anymore. Chapter 835. Huh. Li Qingshan stilled. He suddenly understood what she meant when she said, "This world is a dream." He no longer cared if he would offend her. "I think you're crazy." When you're in the dream, who doesn't think you're crazy? Tell me, are you crazy? Clam King of Mirage Sea grabbed Li Qingshan's collar and shouted fiercely. Suddenly, she showed fear and looked around in panic. She raised a hand to cover her mouth and said to Li Qingshan in a low voice, "Say, is someone watching us right now? If my performance is too bad, will I be killed?" Li Qingshan subconsciously looked around and suddenly reacted. He pushed her away. "Fuck you, it's fine if you're crazy, but don't infect me. Tell me, what should I do?" Clam King of Mirage Sea roared and gripped the divine talisman of great creation in her hand. With a crack, cracks appeared and blood seeped into it. I don't know. Li Qingshan shouted at her. You think saying you don't know is enough? You idiot! Clam King of Mirage C's voice grew louder. Stupid or smart, I follow the guidance of my heart. If I will wake up from this dream one day, why should I worry? If this is a dream I won't wake up from, then there's even less to worry about. Li Qingshan did not think he was an extremely smart person, so he did not think about things he could not understand. I see, idiots really live easier lives. Clam King of Mirage C was stunned for a moment and sighed with a bitter smile. If you say another word, I'll beat you up. Li Qingshan was angry. It's not like you can beat me. Clam King of Mirage C said disdainfully. All right, I've said what I wanted to say. We can go now. Li Qingshan was helpless. I've thought for thousands of years, but I still can't understand. Clam King of Mirage C looked at the sky in a daze and sighed as she closed her eyes. A long time later, she opened them again and said, Forget it. She seemed to be relieved of a great burden. In an instant, the world shook. As far as Li Qingshan could see, the haze that shrouded the sky above the city dissipated. The high-rise buildings below collapsed, and the people screamed in fear. They were like headless flies bumping into each other. It was like a scene from a disaster movie. 100-story skyscraper collapsed. Many people stared blankly at the shadow enveloping them, forgetting to escape. However, the moment the building hit the ground, it silently burst into countless colorful bubbles of various sizes. Be it the reinforced concrete, the people, or the trees, they all turned into bubbles and danced in the air. In the blink of an eye, the city had completely disappeared, leaving only the tall mirage standing alone. Bubbles floated in all directions, filling the entire world and bursting at high altitudes. The illusion was collapsing. The blue sky twisted and rippled with colors. Li Qingshan suddenly realized that they were in a giant bubble. Outside the bubble, thunder could be heard in the distance. Li Qingshan was surprised. He exchanged glances with Xiao, and don't tell me this is last question, Li Qingshan. The Clam King of Mirage C's figure gradually turned illusory. She asked, Now tell me, am I real? I don't know, Li Qingshan said, honestly. He really could not understand the Clam King of Mirage C. The thunder grew closer and louder. It contained a terrifying aura that could crush and destroy everything. This was without a doubt the fourth heavenly tribulation. The thousands of years of thinking might have been nothing, but even if he could not obtain an answer, he could let go of the question. She had begun the tribulation. She would ascend to another world, or she would turn into dust in the tribulation lightning. This would be the time to bid farewell. All right then, at least remember my name, just like how you remember Little, and that cow. Suddenly, he looked over, only to see the Clam King of Mirage C, Shen Mengdai, covering her eyes with her hand as she gazed into the distant horizon. She acted like it had nothing to do with her. Even Little, and who had always remained unfazed, was taken aback. Li Qingshan glanced at the sky before lowering his head to look at her. He said in surprise, Aren't you? How stupid! The one who ascended was clearly a butterfly. I'm called the Clam King of Mirage C. Do you think the clam and the butterfly are the same thing? Shen Mengdai said with a disdainful expression, Why didn't you? We're living in a dream. Who knows what will happen after ascension? Although there are 6 paths of reincarnation, it might be a huge lie. What if that dreamer doesn't dream of the world outside the 9 provinces, and that place is just a dreamless void? Wouldn't I be dead for sure? How can I take such a risk? Shen Mengdai explained seriously. Suddenly, she frowned. No, you can't say that. It's too disrespectful. She knelt down toward the sky and chanted piously, "Oh, great master of dreams, I am your loyal servant. Please forgive my rudeness. You useless idiot, kill me if you have the guts." After saying this, she looked around cautiously. However, the sea breeze was calm, and the moonlight was gentle. Nothing happened. Her lips curled into a smug smile. That smile gradually widened into hysterical laughter. She leaped up, waved her arms, and jumped and ran on the surface of the sea. "Ha ha ha ha! I'm the smartest! I'm the strongest! You're all idiots!" Li Qingshan finally confirmed one thing. She really had gone mad. However, he was unsure whether what he saw right now was just an illusion she had left behind, or whether the butterfly that had flown away had always been a dream of hers. Regardless, she had indeed undergone the fourth heavenly tribulation, and she was no longer bound by the mirage sea. Just the thought of a super madwoman like her was terrifying. After going mad, Shen Mengdai arrived before Li Qingshan again. She walked over the waves, elegant and serene, as beautiful as a dream. It was impossible to imagine what she looked like when she went mad. She said, "I'm leaving." "Where?" Li Qingshan asked instinctively, but he regretted it as soon as he asked it. What did that have to do with him? "The Dragon Province. I still have a debt to settle." Shen Mengdai revealed a chilling, sunken smile. Afterwards, before Li Qingshan could say anything, she burst like a bubble and vanished. All that remained was her final words, echoing through the sea, under the moon, and in his heart. Even though the slumbering enemy put up less of a resistance, they were unable to make eye contact. In this dangerous moment, it instead pushed the power of the innate ability to the limit. The surroundings twisted and changed, going from the pitch-black belly of the mountain to a gloomy forest. Miasma gathered in the air, such that even the scenery slightly further away became blurry. Why did I fall under a tree? No, I have to hurry back. It's far too dangerous here, a shaman young man said in a panic. A young shaman said in a panic. Although his face was smeared with paint, he seemed to resemble the myriad poison ancestor when he was young. When he tried to find a large tree to climb up, the wind began to rise in the forest. Why is there wind here? The young man gazed in the direction of the wind. The thick miasma that had not dispersed for millennia suddenly surged and dispersed, like subjects welcoming the arrival of their king. Two specks of scarlet light vaguely appeared. Awoo! There was a vicious tiger's roar, and the entire forest shook. The fierce wind became even more violent, completely dispersing the miasma and revealing a vicious tiger. Its fur was scarlet like fire, shining with glossy light in the darkness. It was covered in bright black patterns, and the character for king was written on its forehead. The tiger saw the young man and walked over slowly. The young man wanted to flee, but he became feeble from fright. The tiger pounced at him gently and pressed him under its front paw, lowering its head and staring at him. A foul smell assaulted his face. The young man looked back in fright. The scarlet eyes were forever engraved in his soul. Li Qingshan jerked awake and looked at his hands. They had not turned into tiger claws. What was that all about earlier? Was I dreaming again? He dreamed that he had turned into a vicious tiger, roaming through the dense forests of the Mist Province before hunting. Li Qingshan discovered that the myriad poison ancestor's soul-nascent soul had already been dyed by the strange light. It stared at Li Qingshan with its eyes wide open, but there was no resentment or hatred anymore. There was only obedience from the bottom of its heart. Was that the myriad poison ancestor's dream earlier? Looks like it was a terrifying nightmare too. He was alarmed by me and woke up from the dream, but then he was affected by the tiger demon's innate ability and pulled back into the dream. My consciousness entered his sea of consciousness. With it, Li Qingshan guessed. In the end, he could not help but sigh. It's all because of that crazy woman in the end. He had personally witnessed the Clam King of Mirage Sea's power. Clearly, it was not that easy to break free from her nightmare, and the tiger demon's innate abilities still seemed to have abilities that he had yet to uncover. He subconsciously rubbed his eyes. Apart from turning his soul into a haunt, would it be effective in deterring the enemy if he used it in regular battles? There was no need for the enemy to directly submit to him. All he needed to do was deter them. Even if it was for a split second, it could be the difference between life and death. This nightmare sure has brought me quite a lot of benefits. At this moment, the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul suddenly let out a baby-like cry and flew high into the air. It shone with rings of green light, illuminating the entire hall. Li Qingshan gazed over. The myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul rapidly grew up, actually turning back into the myriad poison ancestor in the end. When the green light dispersed, it landed before Li Qingshan again and directly knelt down. It was filled with shame and regret. "Great King, please forgive this old man for his great disrespect." Seeing how his mortal enemy had become like this, Li Qingshan could not help but be taken aback. The corner of his lips curled into a smile, but he refused to believe it completely, afraid that it was a trap. As a result, he straightened himself out and coughed gently. "Old bastard, do you know your crimes?" I do. The myriad poison ancestor bowed his head repeatedly. "What crimes? Tell me." Some of the doubt in Li Qingshan's eyes vanished. Great cultivators had their own pride. It was basically impossible for them to do something like that. "First, I shouldn't have launched a sneak attack on Savage Mountain while the Great King was away, much less resent the Great King over the deaths of my disciples. Afterwards, the Great King wanted to kill me, so I should have stood still and allowed the Great King to kill me. Then I tried to flee, which added to my crimes. I can't even bear it. Even if I die, I only hope the Great King can allow me to make up for my crimes with merit. With how wise and valiant the Great King is, you'll definitely unite the 9 provinces in the future. I'm willing to follow your lead." The myriad poison ancestor said a great deal of flattery again. Clearly, the myriad poison cult possessed a legacy like that, which even made Li Qingshan feel embarrassed. He barked, "Shut up." Yes, the myriad poison ancestor immediately shut up. He was extremely obedient. Li Qingshan could not help but laugh aloud. He had finally come to an end with this battle, and he had benefited greatly from it. His laughter echoed through the surroundings before gradually dying down, turning into a long sigh again. Seeing a powerful opponent who had fought him to the death reduced to such a state was an extremely delightful matter, but it also made him feel rather sorrowful. The path of cultivation was so cruel. Once he failed, he might end up begging for death. There was no point in taking revenge anymore. After confirming that the myriad poison ancestor had already submitted to the tiger demon's ability, he said, "You can rise." Li Qingshan then asked about the myriad poison ancestor's current state. The myriad poison ancestor truly was a knowledgeable great cultivator after all, immediately giving him an explanation. Throughout history, a few great cultivators would become ghost cultivators after their bodies were destroyed, unable to find a suitable body with their soul nascence. As a result, they would become ghost cultivators, and their strength would be equivalent to ghost kings. Of course, ghosts were not immortal. In particular, ghost cultivators in the world of the living might even have a shorter lifespan than when they were humans. Once their time was up, their souls would disperse if they did not return to the 6 paths of Sasra. "Then, how much lifespan do you have left?" Li Qingshan asked in a hurry. He had managed to recruit the strongest lackey after so much difficulty, so he had better not kick the bucket in just a few years. I've already cultivated for 957 years. Originally, I only had a few centuries left in my lifespan, but now that I've become a ghost cultivator, that might not necessarily be the case. If I continue doing things like before, my lifespan will decrease by over 100 years. If I cultivate in a land of extreme een, my lifespan will increase by quite a lot, and if I have a method for ghost cultivators, my lifespan will increase even further. If I stay in the hungry ghost realm, I might even be able to live for another few thousand or even 10,000 years. A few centuries is enough. Li Qingshan waved his hand and took out the Sumeru ring he had stolen from the myriad poison ancestor with a flip of his hand. With a gentle flick of his thumb, it landed in the myriad poison ancestor's hand. Although Ru Xian had searched through it, she had mainly taken away the medicinal ingredients for the scripture on poison. She had not touched anything else, including the arcane treasure, the Jade Throne. If he returned it to the myriad poison ancestor now, his strength would not suffer too much. The myriad poison ancestor bowed in thanks and put the Sumeru ring back on his finger. With that, how much of your strength will you be able to recover? Li Qingshan asked. 60%. Only 60%. Li Qingshan was surprised. This was slightly more than he had imagined. Suddenly becoming a ghost cultivator requires some time to adapt. By then, it should be 70%. The cult treasure was destroyed, or I could increase it by another 10%. If I have a good method for ghost cultivators, I might be able to recover to 80% or even 90%. The myriad poison ancestor stood with his hands by his sides and said politely, like a loyal old butler, "A method for ghost cultivators." Li Qingshan sank into his thoughts. He only knew that the Umbral insect should possess powerful methods for ghost cultivators, but he was a disciple of the Chan monastery of Devanaga right now, coupled with the fact that he was an elder of the Sword Collection Palace. He was basically an enemy of the Umbral insect. I just happen to know a decent method for ghost cultivators. It can recover his strength to 100% or even higher. Littleton walked in from outside. There was no blood oath scroll in the world that could restrain a great cultivator. The other cave masters said nothing, but they all felt like this was the final possibility. However, out of consideration for Li Qingshan's pride, they could not bring themselves to say anything. Since Yu Wufeng had started, they all chimed in. At the same time, they carefully observed Li Qingshan's expression. If the myriad poison ancestors suddenly rebelled, they would all lose their lives. If it were not for the ability of the tiger demon, accomplice to the tiger, Li Qingshan would have never believed in the myriad poison ancestors' loyalty. He did not explain too much right now either. You don't have to worry. I have my plans for this. Anyway, the myriad poison cult has fallen. Fire Melt Mountain will be next. Yes, Your Majesty. The cave masters dared not say anything else. Only the strong were worthy of respect. Yu Wufeng had no idea whether he should be happy for his sect in the distant South Sea or not. Their mortal enemy of several thousand years had actually been defeated just like that. However, the savage mountain that had risen up like a comet would probably be even more brutal. Li Qingshan arrived under the great banyan tree and sat down in a hidden tree hole. He told the banyan tree king everything that had happened in the Mirage Sea. However, he brushed over the many details of the nightmare in a vague manner. It was not that he did not trust the banyan tree king, but that was his deepest secret. After listening to Li Qingshan's story, the banyan tree king fell silent, as if he was thinking about something. For a moment, there was only the rustling of the canopy in the wind. quite a while later, just now sighed in amazement. Originally, I was worried that you would encounter danger in the Mirage Sea, but I didn't think it would be a blessing in disguise. Looks like I've wasted my efforts. I will never forget Senior's care and concern, said Li Qingshan. Even though there were many deceptions, the Banyan Tree King was doing it for his own good. No, this is your fortune, and it's what you deserve. That oxen, no, that Senior has a discerning eye. I believe that one day you'll be able to reunite with him. In their many years of association, the Banyan Tree King had vaguely guessed the existence of oxen. However, he had always doubted Li Qingshan's ambitions. Only at his level did he understand just how distant that place was. However, after hearing about Li Qingshan's experiences in his dream, he felt that perhaps he really could reach that step. His persistence was not the kind of stubbornly stubborn persistence. Instead, it often gave people a feeling that it did not matter. It was as if even if he could not reach beyond the heavens, it was not a big deal. However, as long as he was still alive, he would continue. Even if he failed in the end, he could still smile calmly and say that he had no regrets. I hope so, Li Qingshan shrugged. But I'm very curious. Has the Clam King of Mirage Sea ascended? If she survived the fourth heavenly tribulation and did not ascend, wouldn't she be invincible? Didn't she already tell you? Shenmengdai. What flew away was naturally her dream, said the Banyan Tree King with a smile. In other words, her true body is still in this world. Li Qingshan was surprised. For her, perhaps dreams are the real thing, said the Banyan Tree King. All right then. I'm just afraid that I won't be able to defeat her. Li Qingshan's resentment was very deep. You don't have to worry about that. The world of the 9 provinces has its own laws, let alone an ascender. Even visitors from a higher world will be restricted by these laws or even suppressed by the entire world. Only those who have reached that senior's level can completely ignore them, said the Banyan Tree King. Though her power is far too wondrous. Even if she's only at the peak of the 3rd heavenly tribulation, she can still turn the dragon province upside down. Hopefully, that fellow fox can suppress her. The Banyan Tree King seemed to have a deep understanding of the Clam King of Mirage Sea's madness. He expressed his worry for the future. Once she began messing around, the situation would probably deteriorate to a point where even his intelligence could no longer predict it. After a deep conversation with Li Qingshan, he said, "Since you've subdued the myriad poison ancestor, you can get him to talk to Ru Xin. After all, there are some things that everyone specializes in. I'm not omniscient." Really? What's she doing exactly? She's acting so mysterious. Sai, you better wait for her to tell you herself. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.